One of these days. One of these days. All right. Hello, hello, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome to club number. Oh, right, because I have that muted. Which I'm working with a new like mixer setting and whatnot. So if you hear sounds that you probably may or may not need to be heard, ugh, there's a reason for that. But anyways, yeah, welcome to the second part of book club. I don't know what to call this night. I just fun thing to do. Fridays. Yeah. My mic. Oh, no, my mic's being stupid. Hey. All right, now you can hear microphones. Ugh, I'm still so out of practice. No, that shouldn't. So many new things going on today. Focus. I wasn't in like a Friday night stream. Forgive me for all of the. Eh. In any case, book club nights. Figure Fridays would be a good day for this versus all days. So yeah, we're gonna do our best to try to get this all taken and figure this all out as we go along. I also hope you can hear me pretty well. I'm Oh, you guys can hear me. Ah. Okay. I also have speech chat enabled, so hopefully that doesn't scare me like it did the last time, because, oh boy, that was relatively scary. All right, without further ado, I'm been a long day. My brain is fried. Weekday is weird for shift. Uh, yeah, I'll just mention that. Anyways, let's check your homework, because I told y'all needed to read. Well, before, if you missed the last stream, or actually, yeah, you know, just watch this entire streaming gun from where it was at and figure out the answers from there. Yeah, that would have been quick. Bit. All right. Probably should have been. I was the. All right. Chapter 2 question. Here's chapter 1 question. All right. So, first question for your homework was: Are hobbits the adventurous type? Well, based on what we know from the first book, they are not. Therefore, the correct answer is no. So, yes, one person said yes. I think that has something. I think that is that line of thinking is more to the trilogy than anything. Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, I forgot that I disabled those times. Fine, because I don't want to. I'm still not used to that. All right. Chapter two questions are. I think someone went for the meme as I first answer. Uh, your chapter 2 questions were: the troll had too much of this for their meals. Out of your options, you had maggoty bread, mutton, salted pork, roasted dwarf, which would have come close to some of the party members. A certain wizard didn't reject his wish, but the correct answer is mutton. So next time I'll try to figure out different timers on, because I can probably guarantee. Press this page. Those votes are gonna go up. And question. This one I kind of had some fun with. I figured this would be it'd be interesting to see how people went with this. Apparently didn't really go as well as planned, because only someone said tea stains. Well, that is the incorrect answer. It is moon ruins. I hope I haven't lost y'all just yet. Try my best. Final question. Yep, and the final question was: who was carrying Bilbo as they fled the goblins? The correct answer out of the dwarves that we 12 dwarfs, right? Strange reason. uh, any case, selected answers you could have picked from were Billy, Thorin, Dory. The correct answer is Dory, because he was the one carrying Bilbo at the very end. Oh boy. Yeah, that was your homework. I think next week I'll do my best to try and get those questions out earlier than just the day of. Well, maybe a secret question. I don't know how many chapters. Yeah, that's right. At least on this. So yeah, that's was your homework. I think that's more my fault for not getting that out earlier. So next time I will next week's how many chapters we get through today. I'm going to attempt to get that homework out early, so that way that's all. But yeah, without further ado, all right, it'd be pretty good. All right, riddles and Bibble opened his eyes. Wonder if he had, for it was just as dark with them shut. No one was anywhere near. Just imagine his. He'd hear nothing, see nothing, he could feel nothing except the stone floor. Very slowly he got up and groped about on all fours till he touched the wall of the tunnel. But neither up nor down, and could he find anything. Nothing at all. No sign of goblins, no dwarf. His head was swimming far from a certain, or even of the direction that they'd been going in. He guessed as well as he could, crawled along for a good way. But suddenly, his hand met what felt like a tiny ring of gold metal lying on the floor of the tunnel. It was a turning point in his career. He did not know it. He put the ring in his pocket, almost without thinking. Certainly, it did not seem any use at the moment. He did not go much further, but sat down on the cold floor and gave himself up to the for a long while. He thought of himself frying bacon and eggs in his own kitchen, where he could feel the inside that it was high time for some meal or other, but that only made him bitter. He could not think what to do, nor could he think of what had happened, or why he had been left behind, or why he had been left behind. The goblins had not caught him, or even when his head was so sore, or even why. Okay. Okay. The truth was he had been lying quiet, out of sight and out of mind in a very dark corner for a while. After some time, he felt for his pipe. It was not broken, and that was something. He felt for his pouch, and there was some tobacco in it, and that was something more. Then he felt for matches. He could not find any at all, and that shattered all his hopes completely. Just as well for him, as he had grievingly come to his senses, goodness knows what the striking of melted tobacco would have brought on him out of the dark holes in this horrible place. Still, at the moment he felt very crushed, but in slapping all of his pockets and feeling all around himself for matches, his hand came to the hilt of his little sword. little dagger he had got from trolls, and that he had quite forgotten. Nor did the goblin seem to notice as he wore it inside his breeches. Now he drew it out. It shone pale and dim before his eyes. So it is an elvish blade too, he thought. Goblins are not very near, and yet not far enough. But somehow he was comforted. It was rather splendid to be wearing a blade made in Goldinian goblin war, which so many songs had sung, and also he had noticed that such weapons made a great impression on the goblins that back on them suddenly. Go back, he thought. Could it all go sideways? Possible. Go forward. Only thing to do. On we go. We got up and trotted along with his little sword held in front of him, one hand feeling the wall, heart all a patter and a pitter. Now certainly Bilbo was in a tight place, but you must remember it was not so tight for him as it would have been for me or you. Hobbits are not quite like ordinary people, and after all, if their holes are nice and cheery places and properly aired, quite different from goblins, still they are more used to tunneling than we are. They do not easily lose their sense of direction underground, not when their heads have recovered from being pumped. Also, they can move very quietly and quite easily. They recover wonderfully from falls and bruises, and have a fond of wisdom by sayings that men have mostly never heard of or forgotten long ago. I should not have liked to have been Mr. Baggins all the same. Tunnel seemed to have no end. All he knew was that it was still going down pretty steadily, keeping in the same direction in spite of a twist and turn or two. There were passages leading off to the side every now and then, as he knew by the glimmer of his sword. Feel his hand on the wall. One of those he took no notice, except to hurry past for fear, or half imagined. On he went, and down. Still heard no sound of anything except the occasional whir of a bat. Startled him at first, till it became too frequent to bother about. He did not know how long he kept hating to go on, not trying to stop, on until he tireder than tired. It seemed like all the way to tomorrow and over it is beyond. Suddenly, without any warning, he trotted a splash into water. Ugh, icy cold. Then he pulled up sharp. That pulled him up. That pulled him up sharp and short. He didn't know whether it was just a pool in the path, or the edge of an underground stream that crossed the passage, or the brink of a dark subterranean. The sword was hardly sharp. He stopped and could hear what he listened to drops drip from an unseen roof. The water below. There seemed no other sort of sound. It was a pool or a lake, not an underground river, he thought. Still, he did not dare wade in the darkness. He could not swim. He thought, too, of a nasty slime, with big, bulging, blonde eyes wiggling in the water. There are strange things like pools and lakes parts of the mountain. Fish whose fathers swim in, goodness knows how many never swam out. But their eyes grew bigger and bigger and bigger from trying to see in the black. Also, there are other things more slimy than fish. Even in the tunnels and caves the goblins have made for themselves, there are other things sneaked inside to the dark. Some of these too go back into the age before the goblins. We only widened them, joined them up with passages. The original owners are still there in odd corners, flickering. Deep down here by the dark water lived old Gollum, a small slimy creature. I don't know where he came from, or who or what he was. It was Gollum. as dark as darkness, except by two big, round, pale eyes and face. He had a little boat, rowed about quietly on the lake. Or lake it was, wide and deep, deadly cold. He paddled it with large feet dangling from over the side, but never a ripple did he make. Not he. He was looking pale eyes for fish. He grabbed with his long fingers, quick as thinking. He liked meat too. Goblin he thought was good when he could get, but he took care they never found him out. He was just throttled them from behind if they owned any near the edge of the water while he was. They were very seldom did. They had a feeling that there was something unpleasant was lurking at the very roots of the mountain. They had come on the lake when they were tunneling down long ago. They found they could go no further. So there their road ended in the ocean. There was no reason to go that way, unless the great goblin said. Sometimes he took a fancy for a fish from the lake, and sometimes neither goblin nor fish came back. Actually, Gollum lived on a slimy island of the distance. He was watching. Oh, heh. It's definitely something I'm. Uh, watching Bilbo now from a distance with pale eyes like. Bilbo could not see him, but he was wondering a lot about Bilbo. For he could see he was not a goblin at all. Gollum got into his boat, shot off from the island while Bilbo was sitting at the brink, altogether. Bilbo checked the spelling of the sounds. Almox. Hmm. All right. Almox it is. Almox. And at the end of his way, and his wits suddenly came up Gollum and whispered and hissed, Bless us and splash us, my precious, I guess it's a choice feast. At least a tasty morsel to make us Gollum. And then when he said Gollum, he made a terrible swallowing sound, poisonous. We got his name, though we always called himself my precious. The hobbit jumped nearly out of his skin when the hiss came to his ears. He suddenly saw the pale eyes sticking out at him. Who are you? He said, thrusting his dagger in front. Why is he my precious? Whispered Gollum. He always spoke to himself, never having. This is what he had come to find out, for he was not really very hungry at the moment, only curious. Otherwise, he would have grabbed first, whispered afterward. I am Mr. Bilbo Baggins. I have lost the dwarves and I've lost the wizard. I don't know where I am, and I don't want to know. If only I can get away. What's he got in his hands? Said Gollum, looking at his sword, which he didn't quite like. A sword, a blade which came out of Godalion. Said Gollum, and became quite polite. Perhaps he sit here and chats with it a bit, see my precious. It's like riddles, and perhaps it does it? He was very anxious to appear friendly, at any rate, until he found out more about the sword and the hobbit, whether he was quite alone really, whether he was good to eat, and whether Gollum was really. Riddles were all he could think of, asking them, sometimes guessing them. Had been the only game he ever played with the other funny creatures sitting in the holes in long, long ago before he lost friends and was driven away. Alone alone and crept down into the dark under the mountain. Very well, said Bilbo. He was very anxious to agree, until he found out more about the creature, whether he was quite alone, whether he was fierce or hungry, or whether he was a friend of the goblins. You ask first, he said, but he had not time because he had not had time to think of a riddle. So Gollum hissed, "What has roots and nobody sees is taller than trees. Up it goes, and yet it never grows." What do you think? What do you think this? What do you think the? I'll give you a little. Yeah. Actually, I'll take water. Easy. Mountain ice. Does it guess easily? It must have competition with us. Just if Precious asks and it doesn't answer, that's it. If it asks and we don't answer, then we do what it wants. Okay? We show it the way out, yes? All right, said Bilbo, not tearing to agree, or nearly bursting to save him. 30 white horses. First they tramp, then they stamp. All stands. That's all you could think of to ask. You have each. It was a rather old one, too, and Gollum knew the two as well. Chestnuts, chestnuts, he hissed. Teeth, my precious. Only had 6. Then he asked a second. Voiceless it cries, wingless it flutters, toothless bites, mouthless mutters. Half a moment, was still thinking uncomfortably. Fortunately, he had heard something rather like before, and getting his wits back, like he thought of the answer. Wind, wind, of course, he said. So pleased they made thought. This will pause you. Eye in a blue face saw an eye in a green. That eye is like this eye, said the first, but low in place and high place. He had been underground quite a long time. He was forgetting this sort of thing, just as Bilbo was beginning to hope that the wretch would Gollum brought back or we lived with his grandmother all in the my precious son. Daisies it means it does. Are these ordinary? Also, they reminded him of Dave, less lonely and sneaky and nap, and that put him. But he is more, or they made him hungry. So this time, a little bit more difficult. It cannot be seen, cannot be felt, cannot be heard, smelt. It lies behind the stars on the hills, and empty holes it fills. It comes first and follows after, ends life and kills. Unfortunately, all and Bilbo had heard that story, and the answer was all around him anyway. Dark, he said, without even scratching his head or putting on his. A box without hinges, key, lid, key or lid, yet golden treasure. He asked again time, till he could think of a really hard one. This, he had thought, a dreadfully eaten chestnut. This, though he had not useful words, usual words, were nasty. He hissed to himself. He did not answer. he whispered. Bilbo, after some impatient. Take your time reading the book. Don't rush the words. Well, what is it? He said. He answers, kettle boiling. Oh, is your mate? Give us a chance. Let us give us a chance, my precious. Well, wrong chance. What about your guess? But suddenly Gollum remembered thieving from suddenly under a riverbank, teaching his grandmother to suck eggs. He said, eggs it is. Then he asked, alive without breath, as cold as death, never thirsty, never drinking, all in mail, never clicking. Also, his turn, easy one. He was always thinking of the. He cannot remember anything better at the moment. He was so flustered by the question. The same, it was a poser for poor Bilbo. Would never have water if he could help it. I imagine, of course, working together. Of course, sitting and not have the danger of your thing. Bilbo sat and once or twice, but no answer came. After a while, listened with pleasure to him. It is nice, precious. Is it juicy? Is it scrumptious? Crunchable. Did I guess that word? Anyway, he began to peer at Bilbo through the darkness. Half a moment. I give you a good. I gave you a good long chance just now. It must make haste. Haste, said Gollum, beginning to climb up on his boat onto the shore to get at Bilbo. But when he put his long, webby feet in the water, a fish jumped out in fright and fell on Bilbo's toes. Ugh, said, cold and clammy. So he guessed, fish, fish, he cried. Is it a fish? Gollum was dreadfully. But Bilbo had asked another riddle as quick as he ever could, so that Gollum had to get back into his boat and think. No legs lay on one leg, two legs, three legs, four legs, got some. It's not really the right time for Bilbo was. Gollum thought might have had some trouble guessing if he had, as it was talking to fish, no legs. It was not very. And after that, the rest. Fish on a table, a man at the table, sitting on a stool. Cat has the bones. That, of course, Gollum. And then he thought at the time, asked hard and horrible, hard and horrible. I'm reading the book. This this thing, all things devour. Birds, beasts, trees, flowers, gnaws on iron, bites steel, grinds hard stones to metal, slays kings, ruins towns, beats high mountains down. Poor Bilbo sat in the dark. All the horrible names, ogres he had never heard told of in tales, but in one of them, not one of them had done all these things. He had a feeling that the answer was quite different, that he thought ought to know. Ought to know it. But he could not think of it. He began to get frightened. That's bad. Gollum began to get out of his boat, flapped into, paddled to the bank. Bilbo could see his eyes coming. His tongue seemed to stick out of his mouth. He wanted to give me more time. Give me more time. And but all that came out was a sudden little squeal. Time, time. Bilbo was saved by pure luck. That, of course. Gollum was disappointed once more. and now he's getting very angry and also tired of the game. It had made him very hungry indeed. This time, he did not go back to the boat. He sat down, and that made the hobbit most scattered his. It's got to ask us a question, my precious. Yes, yes. Just one more question to guess. Yes, yes, said Gollum. But Bilbo simply could not think of any question. Thing sitting next to him, pawing, poking him. He scratched himself, pinched himself. Oh, still, he could not think of anything. Ask us, said Gollum. Bilbo pinched himself and slapped himself. He gripped on the little sword, or he even felt in his pocket with his. There he found the ring, thing he had picked up in the passage, forgotten. Oh, what have I got in my pocket? He said aloud. He was talking, but Gollum thought it was a riddle, and so he was frightfully upset. Not fair! Not fair! He hissed. It isn't fair, my precious, is it, to ask us what it's got in its nasty little pocketses? Bibble, seeing what had happened, and having nothing better, stuck to his question. What have I got in my pocket? He says louder. It must give us 3 guesses, my precious, 3 guesses. These S's. Very well, a guess. Guess away, said Bill. Answers! Wrong, said Bilbo, but luckily just taking his out again. Guess again. Said Gollum, more upset than ever. He would, of all the things he had kept in his own pocket, fish bones, goblins' teeth, wet shells, bit of a bat wing, sharp stone to sharpen his fangs on, and other nasty. Try to think of what other people might keep in their pockets. Knife, he said at last. Wrong, said Bilbo, who had lost his time ago. Last guess. Now Gollum was in a much worse Bilbo. When Bilbo had asked a question, he hissed and spluttered and rocketed himself backwards and forwards, slapped his feet on the ground, wriggled and squirmed. Did not dare to waste. Come on, said Bilbo. I'm waiting. He tried to sound bold and cheerful, but he did not feel at all sure how the game. Whether Gollum guessed right or not. Time's up. String or nothing! Shrieked Gollum, which was not quite fair, working 2 guesses at once. Both wrong, cried Bilbo, very much relieved. He had jumped at once to his feet, put his back to the nearest wall, and had his little sword. He knew, of course, that the riddle games was sacred, and immense antiquity, and of immense antiquity. That's how that's. There's no high antiquity. I'm going to say that a lot. Even wicked creatures rated cheap. But he felt he could not trust this slime. He promises that any excuse would do for him to slide out of it. And after all, that last question had not been a genuine riddle according to the rules. But at any rate, Gollum did not want to attack him. He could see the sword in Bilbo's hands. He sat still, shivering and whispering. At last, Bilbo could wait no longer. Well, he said, what about your promise? I want to go. You must show me the way. If you say so, precious. Show the nasty little Bogginsons way out. Yes. What has it got in its pockets, eh? Not string, precious, but not nothing. Oh no. Never mind. You mind, said a promise. Promise. Crush it, impatient, precious, his Gollum. But it must wait. Yes, it must. We can't go up to the tunnels too hastily. We must go and get some things first. Yes, things to help us. Well, hurry up, said Bilbo, relieved to think of Gollum going away. Thought he was excuse and didn't mean to come back. Gollum, what useful thing could get him out of Dark Lake. But he was wrong. Gollum did not. Oh, Gollum did mean to come back. See you eyesight things. Did mean to come. He was angry now and hungry, and he was already. Not far away was his island, of which Bilbo knew nothing. And there, in his hiding place, he kept a small wretch or ornament. And a very beautiful thing, very wonderful. He had a ring, golden ring, precious ring. My birthday present, he whispered to himself, as he had often done. That's what we want. Yes, we want it. He wanted it because it was power, and if you slipped the ring on you, invisible, only in the full sun, then only by your shadow. Oh, I call Sinead. Although kind of hard to do that with things. Actually, yeah. Oh yeah, that's right. First using by Theodore. It was a more forested area and was probably more of don't think they ever used the ring ever again in daylight. So I can't honestly say that that would have. Oh no, am I cutting out every so often? I would hope not. Let me go to. So I probably want to in the game up just. Try that. I do apologize. All right, let's try that. I think that might do it. Let me up the close. All right, let's see if that works. Oh, that's not gonna work. I'm not good with the up the attack time. This time I'm gonna up a little bit. I do apologize that I'm messing with stuff as we're doing stuff. I just want to make sure this is all correct again. Turn that down a little bit. Open that up a little bit. Maybe turn down the noise gate. Let's try that. me turn down the release time just a little. And maybe turn down the gain just a little bit. I think that's no spread. Oh, I need to turn in the expression probably just a little bit. So we don't want that background noise getting caught. All right, a little bit more. That should probably do it. All right, and now I just need to double check him. All right, I think I got the settings correct this time, so hopefully I'm not gonna cut out as much. It is, however, getting a little bit hot, so I am going to turn a fan on in the background, so I do apologize in advance for about this. All right, we need to. All right, hopefully that fixes that. Okay, it seems like that's going to be a small problem. Although if I put my chair like this, cover the mic. It's still here. Yeah, it still hears it. Ah, it's. Ugh. Both of them are on there. Actually, I would put. Nope, not that one. I want to put that up about there. Let's try that. All right, let's try 4.2. That might. Maybe 4.5. That might do a lot better. I might just have to turn the fan down. Maybe that's what I'll have to do. Or move to the other side of the room. Mic settings, everybody. They're so fun. Why am I still hearing that in the background, though? I shouldn't be hearing that. Be great if I could have gotten this into my mixer, but unfortunately... let's... filters. I'll turn the gain down and then... Uh-oh, well, that's not gonna work. Cool. Did that not work? No, not properties. I might have to ask some people about that because that's kind of bugging me right now. It's really weird. Really shouldn't be catching that though, especially with like two different programs giving it like a noise gate. So, oh, let's try that. Maybe having it at like a 10 noise gate might do something. Nope, I'm still hearing that, which doesn't make sense. I'm having so much fun. Oh well, I'll figure this out. Maybe I turned up my gain just a little bit. That way it's like, it's not... There we go. That's now it's not as prominent. Yep, that'll work. Let me get back to it then. Do do do. Let me just do this to the. Yeah, sorry about that. I am working on like semi odd setup. All right. Ah! Ah! Okay, that's way louder than that needs to be. But I'm glad I have that on a knob now. All right. We are a birthday present. Then only by your shadow, and that would be shaky and faint. My birthday present. It came to me on my birthday, my precious. So he had always said to himself. Oh, but who knows how Gollum came to that present? By that present ages ago, in the old days when such rings were still large in the world, perhaps even the master who ruled them could not have said. Gollum used to wear it at first, but till it tired him. And then he kept it in a pouch next to his skin till it galled him. And now usually he hid it in a hole in the rock on his island, and always going back to look at it. And still sometimes he puts it on. And when he could not bear to be parted from any longer, or when he was very, very hungry and tired of fish, then he would creep along the dark passages looking for stray goblins. He might even venture into places where the torches were lit and made his eyes blink and smart. For he would not be safe. For he was safe. Oh, yes, quite safe. No one would see him. No one would notice him till he had his fingers around their throats. Only a few hours ago had he worn it and caught a small goblin imp. How it squeaked! He still had a bone or two left to gnaw, but he wanted something softer. Quite safe, yes, he whispered to himself. It won't see us, will it, my precious? No, it won't see us. And its nasty little sword will be useless. Yes, quite. This is what his wicked little mind had slipped suddenly from Bilbo's side, and flapped back to the boat, and went off in the dark. Bilbo thought he had heard the last of him, and still waited for a while, for he had no idea how to find his way out alone. Hello, Master Midnight. Welcome to Book Club. Well, considering that emote's actually well appropriate, considering we are talking about Gollum. And we all know how he loves to nom on people. I'm doing pretty good so far. You know, just reading the book, doing what I can to entertain those who are listening. After dealing with some small technical issues with microphone that I'm probably going to save. Thank you for the hearts, Master Midnight. Now, let us dive back into the story. Where was I? Useless. Okay, fine. Still, he waited for a while, for he had no idea how to find his way out. Suddenly, he heard a screech. It sent a shiver down his back. Gollum was cursing and wailing away in the gloom, not very far off by the sound of it. He was on his island, scrambling here and there, searching and seeking in vain. Where is it? Where is it? Bilbo heard him crying. Lost it is, my precious. Lost, lost. Curse us and crush us. My precious is lost. I'm so glad I only have to deal with using this voice for however long this chapter is. What's the matter? Said Bilbo called. What have you lost? It mustn't ask us, shrieked Gollum. Not its business. No, Gollum. It's lost. I am not repeating those three because that's going to kill my voice even faster. Well, so
Well, so I am, cried Bilbo, and I wanted to get unlost, and I won the game, and you promised. So come along. Come and let me out, and then go on with your looking. Utterly miserable as Gollum sounded, Bilbo could not find much pity in his heart. And he had a feeling that anything Gollum wanted so much could hardly be something good. Come along, that's Bilbo shouting that. Come along, he shouted. No, not yet, precious. We must search for it, as it's lost, Gollum. But you never guessed my last question, and you promised. Never promised, said Gollum. Then suddenly out of the gloom came a sharp hit. What's it's got in its pockets? Tell us that. It must tell them first. Tell first, not them first. Ugh. As far as Bilbo knew, there was no particular reason why he should not tell. Gollum's mind had jumped to a guess quicker than his naturally. For Gollum had brooded for ages on this one thing. He was always afraid of it being stolen. But Bilbo was annoyed at the delay. After all, he had won the game pretty fairly and at a horrible risk. Answers were to be guessed, not given, he said. But it wasn't a fair question, said Gollum. Not a riddle, precious, no. Oh well, if it's a matter of ordinary questions, Bilbo replied, then I asked one first. What have you lost? Tell me that. What has it got in its pockets? The sound came hissing louder and sharper. As he looked towards it to his alarm, Bilbo now saw two small points of light peering at him. As suspicion grew in Gollum's mind, the light of his eyes burned with a pale flame. What have you lost? Bilbo persisted. But now the light in Gollum's eyes had become a green fire, and it was coming swiftly nearer. Gollum was in his boat again, paddling wildly back to the dark shore, and had such a rage of loss and suspicion was in his heart that no sword had any terror for him. Bilbo could not guess what had maddened the wretched creature, but he saw that was all up, and Gollum meant to murder him at any rate. Just in time, he turned and ran blindly back the dark passage down which he had come, keeping close to the wall and feeling it with his left hand. What's it got in his pockets? He heard a hiss loud behind him, and the splash as Gollum leapt from his boat. What have I wonder, he said to himself as he padded and stumbled along. He put his left hand in his pocket, and the ring felt very cold as it quietly slipped onto his groping forefinger. The hiss was coming close behind him. He turned now and saw Gollum's eyes, like small green lamps, coming up the slope. Terrified, he tried to run faster, but suddenly he stuck his toes on a snag in the floor and fell flat with the little sword under him. In a moment, Gollum was on him. But before Bilbo could do anything, recover his breath, pick himself up, or wave his sword, Gollum passed by, taking no notice of him, cursing and whispering on it. And as he ran, what could it mean? Gollum could see in the dark. Bilbo could see the light of his eyes palely shining even from behind. Painfully he got up and sheathed his sword, which was going faint again. Then, very cautiously, he followed. There seemed nothing else to do. It was no good going back to Gollum's water. Perhaps if he had followed, Gollum might lead him the same way they've escaped without meaning to. Curse it! Curse it! Curse it! Hissed Gollum. Curse the Bagginses! It's gone! What's it got in its pockets? Oh, we guess, my precious. He found it. Yes, he must have my birthday present. Bilbo pricked his ears. He was at last beginning to guess himself. He hurried a little, getting as close as he dared behind Gollum, who was still not going quickly, but not looking back, but turning his head from side to side as Bilbo could see the faint shimmer on the wall, a glimmer. My birthday present, curses! How do we lose it, my precious? Yes, that's it. When we came this way last, when we twisted that nasty young squeaker, that's it. Curse it, it slipped from us. After all these ages and ages, it's gone. Gollum, Suddenly Gollum sat down and began to weep. A whistling and gurgling sound, horrible to listen to. Bilbo halted and flattened himself up against the tunnel wall. After a while, Gollum stopped weeping and began to talk. He seemed to have an argument with himself. It's no good to go back there to search. No, we doesn't remember all the places we visited. It's no use. The Baggins has got in its pockets as the nasty noser has found its way, it says. We says, we guesses, precious, only guesses. We can't know till we know the nasty creature and squeezes it, but it doesn't know what the present can do, does it? It still keeps it in its pockets. It doesn't know and can't go far. It's lost itself. What nasty nosy thing. It doesn't know all the way out. It said so. It said so, yes, but it's tricksy. It doesn't say what it means. It won't say what it's got in its pockets. It knows the way in. It must know a way out. Out, yes. It's off to the back door. To the back door, that's it. The goblins will catch it then. It can't get out that way, precious. Goblins, yes. But if it gets to the present, our precious as present, then the goblins will get it. Gollum. They will find it. They will find out what it does. We shan't ever be safe again. Never. Gollum. One of the goblins will put it on, and no one will see him. He will be there, but not seen. Not even our clever eyes will notice him. And it will be creepsy and tricksy and catch us. Gollum. Gollum. Then let's stop talking, precious, and make haste. For the Baggins has gone that way. We must be quick and see. Go, not that far. Must make haste. With a spring, Gollum got up and started shambling off at great pace. Bilbo hurried after him, still cautiously through his cheek. He feared now, was tripping up another snag and falling with a noise. His head was a whirl of hope and wonder. It seemed the ring he had was a magic ring. It made you invisible. He had heard of such things, of course, in old tales, but it was hard to believe that he really found one by accident. Still, there it was. Gollum, with his bright eyes, passed him by, only a yard to one side, and on they went. Gollum flip-flapping ahead, hissing and cursing, Bilbo being behind as softly as a hobbit can. Soon they came to places where, as Bilbo had noticed on the way, down side passages opened, this and that. Gollum began at once to count them. Once left, yes. Once right, yes. Two right, yes, yes. Two left, yes, yes. And so on and so on. And the count grew as he slowed and began to get shaky and weepy, for he was leaving the water further and further behind, and he was getting very afraid goblins might be about, and he had lost his ring. At last he stopped up by a low opening on the left side as they went up. 7 right, yes. 6 left, yes, he whispered. That's it. This is the way to the back door, yes. Here's the passage. He peered in and shrank back. But we mustn't go in, precious. No, we mustn't. Goblins are down there. Lots of goblins. We smell them. What shall we do? Curse them and crush them? We must wait here, precious. Wait and bit and see. So they came to a dead stop. Gollum had brought Bilbo to a way out after all. But Bilbo could not get in. There was Gollum still humped up right in the opening. His eyes gleamed cold in his head as he swayed it from side to side between his knees. Bilbo crept away from the wall more quietly than a mouse. But Gollum stiffened at once and sniffed, and his eyes went green. He hissed softly but menacingly. Uh-oh, I'm dropping frames. Don't do that. Don't you do that. I don't like it when you do that, OBS. Might be quieter than normal. Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, I had to turn my gain down because of the fan I have on in the background. Actually, I can probably turn the gain on an OBS and maybe it won't be that bad. Find out in a second.
Never mind. That's pretty bad. I think. Yeah, that'd be pretty bad. Or, I'd just suffer in the heat for a little bit. Yeah, let me do that. Sorry about that. I had to let my roommate know what was going on. And that I plan to put a help desk ticket in for my apartment complex to double check the heater. Alright, let's turn that up a bit. Let's turn that up a bit. Alright, then now that should be good, right? Y'all can hear me nice and perfect, right? Now I gotta probably turn up. I gotta probably reset the noise gate settings. Alright, let's try that. Okay, you probably should. Alright, there we go. Alright, sorry about that. Let's continue on. Where were we? Let's see. He could not see the hobbit, but now he was on alert. Alright, I guess I'll also do a little bit of a stretch. Thank you for the stretch, and I guess I'll hydrate again. This time I'll drink quarters of my sparkling waters. There we go. Thank you for the stretch and hydrate, Master Midnight. I was on alert. And I had other senses that the darkness had sharpened. His hearing, green smell. He seemed to be crouched down right with his hands flat, splayed on the floor. And his head thrust out nose almost to stone. Though he was only a black shadow in the gleam of his own eyes, Bilbo could see or feel that he was as tense as a bowstring gathering for a spring. Bilbo almost stopped up breathing, and when stiff himself, he was desperate. He must get away out of this horrible darkness, and while he had any strength left, he must fight. He must stab the foul thing, put its eyes out, kill it! It meant to kill him.
No, not a fair fight. He was invisible now. Gollum had no sword. Gollum had not actually threatened to kill him, or tried yet. And yet he was miserable, alone, lost. A sudden understanding, a pity mixed with horror, welled up in Bilbo's heart. A glimpse of endless, unmarked days without light, of hope, or hope of betterment, hard stone, cold fish, sneaking and whispering. All these thoughts passed in a flash of a second. He trembled, and then quite suddenly in another flash, as if it were lifted by a new strength resolved, he leaped. No great leap for a man, but he leapt in the dark straight over Gollum's head. He jumped 7 feet forward and 3 in the air. Indeed, had he known it, he only just missed cracking his skull in the low arc of the passage. Gollum threw himself backwards and grabbed as the hobbit flew over him, but it was too late. His hands snapped thin air, and Bilbo, falling far on his sturdy feet, sped off down the new tunnel. He did not turn to see what Gollum was doing, though there was hissing and cursing, almost at his heels at first. Then it stopped. All at once there came a blood-curdling shriek, filled with hatred and despair. Gollum was defeated. He dared not go further. He had lost. Lost his prey, and lost, too, the only thing he had ever cared for, his precious. The cry, it brought Bilbo's heart to his mouth, but still he held on. Now faint as an echo, but menacing, the voice came behind him. Thief! 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 Baggins, we hates it forever! Then there was silence, but it seemed too menacing to Bilbo. If goblins are so near that he smelt them, he thought, then they'll have heard his shrieking and cursing. Careful now, or this way will lead you to worse things. The passage was low and roughly made. It was not too difficult for the hobbit, except when, in spite of all care, he stubbed his poor toes again, several times on nasty, jagged stones in the floor. A bit low for goblins, at least for big ones, thought Bilbo, not knowing that even big ones, the orcs of the mountain, go along at great speed. I'm not the only one who heard that crack, right? Give me one quick second. I'm gonna put you all on standby screen real quick. Oh, come
All right. Turns out that was the sound of a picture falling off the wall because the adhesive on our that was on the picture decided to stop working. Thankfully, the photo is intact, and also thankfully, we do have another way to get it up there. We'll put it back on the wall. It's just going to be the process of putting it up on the wall. Where was I? Going at great speed, stooping low with their hands almost into the ground. Soon the passage that had been sloping down began to go up again, and after a while it climbed steeply. That slowed Bilbo down, but at last the slope stopped, and the passage turned a corner and dipped down again, and there, at the bottom of a short incline, he saw fluttering round another corner. Welcome back. Not a red light as fire or lantern, but a pale of outdoors sort of light. Then Bilbo began to run, scuttling as fast as his legs would carry him. He turned the last corner and came sailing right into an open space where light, after all that time in the dark, seemed dazzling bright. Really, it was only a leak of sunshine in through a doorway where a great door in stone was left standing open. Bilbo blinked. Then suddenly he saw goblins in full armor, drawn swords, sitting just inside the door, watching it with wide eyes, watching the passage that it led to. They were aroused, alert, ready for anything. They saw him sooner than he saw them. Yes, they saw him, whether it was accident or was the last trick of the ring before it took to a new master. It was not Aya's finger. With yells of delight, the goblins rushed upon him. A pang of fear and loss, like an echo of Gollum's misery, smote Bilbo, and forgetting to even draw his sword, struck in his hand. He stuck his hand inside his pockets, and there was the ring still, and in his left pocket. It slipped on his finger. The goblin stopped short. They could not see a sign of him, and he had vanished. They yelled twice as loud as before, but not so delightfully. "Where is it?" they cried. "Go back up the passage," some shouted. "This way," some yelled. "That way," others yelled. "Look out the door," bellowed the captain. Whistles blew, armor clashed, swords rattling. Goblins cursed and swore and ran hither and thither, falling over one another and getting very angry. And there was a little terrible outcry to do and disturbance. Bilbo was dreadfully frightened, but he had the sense to understand what had happened and sneak behind a big barrel, which held drink for the goblin guards, and so get out of the way and avoid being bumped into and trampled to death or caught by feel. "I must get to the door. I must get to the door," he kept saying to himself. But it was a long time before he ventured to try. Then it was a horrible game of blind man's bluff. The place was full of goblins running about, and the poor little hobbit dodged this way and that. He was knocked over by a goblin who could not make out what he had bumped into, scrambling on all fours, slipped between the legs of a captain just in time, got up and ran for the door. It was still ajar, but a goblin had pushed it nearly to. Bill struggled, but he could not move it. He tried to squeeze through the crack. He squeezed and squeezed, and he was stuck. It was awful. He squeezed and squeezed. Wait, I read the thing. His buttons got wedged in the edge of the door, or at the doorpost. He could see outside. It was open air. There were a few steps running down to a narrow valley between tall mountains. The sun came out from behind a cloud and shone bright on the outside of the door, but he could not get through. Suddenly, one of the goblins inside shouted, "There's a shadow by the door! Something is outside!" Bilbo's heart jumped into his mouth. He gave a terrific squirm. The buttons burst in all directions. He was through with a torn coat and a waistcoat, leaping down the steps like a goat, while bewildered goblins were still picking up his nice brass buttons at the doorstep. Of course, they soon came down after him, hooting and hollering and hiding among the trees, but they don't like the sun. It makes their legs wobble and their heads giddy. And they could not find Bilbo with the ring on, slipping in and out of the shadows of the trees, running quick and quiet, keeping out of the sun. So soon they went back, grumbling and cursing to the guard door, and Bilbo had escaped. Chapter 6. Out of the frying pan, into the fire. Bilbo had escaped the goblins, but he did not know where he was. He had lost his hood, cloak, food, pony, his buttons, and his friends. He wandered on till the sun began to sink westwards behind the mountains. Their shadows fell across Bilbo's path, and he looked back. Then he looked forward and could see before him only the ridges and slopes of falling towards lowlands and plains glimpsed occasionally between the trees. "Oh, good heavens," he exclaimed. "I seem to have got right to the other side of the misty mountains, right to the edge of the land beyond. Where can Gandalf and the dwarves have got to? I only hope to goodness that they are not still back there in the power of goblins." He still wandered on out of the little high valley and over its little edge and down the slopes beyond. But all the while, very little uncomfortable thought was growing inside them. He wondered whether he ought not to. Now he had the magic ring to go back to the horrible, horrible tunnels and look for his friends. He had just made up his mind that it was his duty, that he must turn back, and very miserable he felt about it when he heard voices. He stopped and listened. It didn't sound like goblins, so he crept forward carefully. He was on a stony path, winding downstairs, the rock wall on the left hand. On the other side of the ground sloped away, and there were dwells up below the level path overhang with bushes and low trees. In one of these dwells, under the bushes, his people were talking. He crept still nearer, and suddenly saw peering between two large boulders a head with a red hood on. It was Balin. Doing lookout, he could have clapped and shouted for joy, but he did not. He still got the ring on, for fear of meeting something unexpected and unpleasant. He saw that Balin was looking straight at him without even noticing. "I'll give them all a surprise," he thought. As he crawled into the bushes at the edge of the dwell, Gandalf was arguing with the dwarves. They were discussing all that had happened to them in the tunnels, and wondering about debating what they were to do now. The dwarves were grumbling, and Gandalf was saying that they could not possibly go on with their journey, leaving Mr. Baggins in the hands of goblins without even trying to find out if he was alive or dead, and without trying to rescue him. "After all, he is my friend," said the wizard, and not a bad little chap. "I feel responsible for him. I wish as to goodness you had not lost him." The dwarves wanted to know why he'd ever been brought at all. Why could he not stick to his friends and come along with them? Why the wizard had not chosen someone with more sense? He has been more trouble than you so far," said one. "If we got to go back now in those abominable tunnels to look for him, then drat him, I say." That's an interesting insult. I might try to use that more often. Possibly. We'll see how that goes. I might have to look that up, make sure that's not a bad term in this day and age. Gandalf answered angrily, "I brought him, and I won't bring things that are no use. Either you help me look for him, or I go and leave you here to get out of the mess as best as you can yourselves. If only we could find him again. And you will thank me before it is all over. Whatever you did want to go and drop him off for, Dory." He would have dropped him," said Dory, "if a goblin had suddenly grabbed your leg from behind in the dark, tripped up your feet, and kicked you in the back. Why didn't you go back And why didn't you pick him back up again? Good heavens, can you ask goblins fighting and biting in the dark? Everybody falling over bodies and hitting one another? You nearly chopped off my head with Glamdring, and Thorn was stabbed here and there and everywhere. Was stabbing, not stabbed. Stabbing here and there and everywhere with Orcrist. All of a sudden, you gave one of your blinding flashes, and we saw goblins running back yelping. You shouted, "Follow me, everybody!" And everybody ought to have followed. We thought everybody had, and there was no time to count. And as we know quite well, till we had dashed through the guard gate, it's out of the Lord door, and head'll scuttle down here. And here we are, without the burglar. Confiscate him. I don't think I said that right. Confiscate. Confiscate? We're gonna move on. And here's the burglar, said Bilbo, stepping into the middle of them, slipping off the ring. Bless me, how they jumped. Then they all shouted with surprise and delight. Gandalf was astonished. It's just any of them were probably more pleased than all the others. He called to Balin and told him what he thought of a lookout man who let people walk into them without a warning. It is a fact that Bilbo's reputation went up a great deal with the dwarves after this. If they had still doubted that he was really a first-class burglar, in spite of Gandalf's words, they doubted no longer. Balin was most puzzled of all, but everyone said that it was a very clever bit of work. Indeed, Bilbo was so pleased with their praise that he just chuckled inside and said nothing. Whatever about the ring. When they asked him how he did, he said, "Oh, just crept along, very carefully and quietly." Well, it is the first time that even a mouse has crept along carefully and quietly under my very nose, and not even been spotted, said Balin. And I take off my hood to you, which he did. Balin, at your service, he said. Your servant, Mr. Baggins, said Bilbo. Then they want to know all about his adventure after they had lost him. He sat down and told them everything, except for the finding of the ring. Not just now, he thought. They were particularly interested in the riddle competition and shuddered most appreciatively at his description of Gollum. And then I couldn't think of any other questions. I'm sitting beside me, so I said, "What was in my pocket?" And he said he couldn't guess in 3 goes. No, he couldn't guess in 3 goes. So I said, "What about your promise? Show me the way." But he came to kill me, and I ran and fell over. He missed me in the dark. Then I followed him because I heard him talking to himself. He thought I really knew the way out, so he was making for it. And then he sat down in the entrance, and I could not get by, so I jumped over him and escaped and ran down into the gate. What about the guards? Weren't they there? Oh yes, lots of them. But I dodged them. I got stuck in the door, which was only opened by a crack. I lost a lot of buttons, he said sadly, looking at his torn clothes. But I squeezed through all right, and here I am. The dwarves looked at him with quite new respect when he talked about dodging guards, jumping over Gollum, and squeezing through, as it was not very difficult or alarming. What did I tell you? Said Gandalf, laughing. Mr. Baggins has more about him than you guess. He gave Bilbo a queer look, for under his bushy eyebrows as he said this, and the hobbit wondered if he had guessed that part of his tale he had left out. Then he had questions for his own to ask, for if Gandalf had explained it all by now to the dwarves, Bilbo had not heard it. He wanted to know how the wizard turned up again, and where they had all got to now. Then the wizard, to tell the truth, never minded explanations clever as more than once. So now he had told Bilbo that both he and Elrond had both known very well the presence of evil goblins in that part of the mountains. But their main gate used to come out of a different pass, one more easy to travel by, so that they often caught people benighted near the gates. Evidently, people had given up going that way, and the goblins must have made openings to new entrance at the top of the pass the dwarves had taken quite recently, because it had not been found. Because it had been found quite safe up till now. I must see if I can't find more of a less decent giant to block up again, or soon there will be no getting over that mountain at all. As soon as Gandalf heard Bilbo's yell, he realized what had happened. In a flash, what had killed the goblins that were grabbing him. He had nipped inside the crack just as it snapped to it. He followed after the drivers and prisoners right to the edge of the great hall. There he sat down and worked up the best magic he could in the shadows. Very ticklish business it was, he said. Touch and go. But of course, Gandalf had made a special study of bewitchments with fire and light. Even the hobbits had never forgotten the magic fireworks at Old Took's midsummer evening parties, as you remember. The rest we all know, except that Gandalf knew that all about the back door, as the goblins had called the lower gate, where Bilbo lost his buttons. As a matter of fact, it was well known to anybody who was acquainted with this part of the mountains, but it took a wizard to keep his head in the tunnels and guide him to the right direction. They made that gate ages ago, he said, partly for a way to escape, if they needed one, partly as a way out into the lands beyond, where they can still come into the dark and do great damage. They guard it always, and no one has ever managed to block it up. They will guard it doubly after this. As he laughed. All the others laughed too. After all, they had lost a great deal. But they had killed the great goblin and a great many others besides, and they had all escaped, so they might not have to. So they might be said to have been the best part of it so far. But the wizard called them to their senses. We must be getting on at once now. We are a little rested, he said. They will be out after us in hundreds when night comes, and already shadows are lengthening. They can smell our footsteps for hours and hours after we've passed. We must be miles on before dusk, as there will be a bit of moon if it keeps fine, that if it is lucky. Not that they mind the moon much, but it will give us a little light to steer by. Oh yes, he said in answer to more questions from the hobbit. You lose track of time inside goblin tunnels. Today's Thursday, and it was Tuesday morning that we escaped. We had gone miles and miles, and we've come right down through the heart of the mountains. And now on the other side, quite a short cut. But we are not at the point to which our pass would have brought us. We are far too north, and have some awkward country ahead of us, and we were still pretty high up. Let's go on. I'm dreadfully hungry, groaned Bilbo, who was suddenly aware they had not had a meal since the night before last. Just think of that for our hobbit. His stomach felt all empty and loose, and his legs all wobbly. Now the excitement was over. Adrenaline will do that to you. Can't help it, said Gandalf, unless you like to go back and ask the goblins nicely to let you have your pony back and your luggage. No, thank you, said Bilbo. Very well, we must tighten our belts and trudge on. We will soon be made into supper, and that'll be much worse than having none ourselves. As they went on, Bilbo looked from side to side for something to eat. But the blackberries were still only in flower, and of course there were no nuts, and not even hawthorn berries. He nibbled on a bit of sorrel, and he drank from a small mountain stream that crossed the path, and he 3 wild strawberries that he found in its bank. But it was not much good. They still went on and on. The rough path disappeared, the bushes and the long grasses between the boulders, the patches and the rabbit crop turf, the thyme and the sage and the marjoram and the yellow rock roses all vanished, and they found themselves at the top of a wide, steep slope of fallen stones, the remains of a landslide. When they began to go down this, rubbish and small pebbles rolled away from their feet. Soon larger bits of split stone went clattering down and started hit other pieces below, slithering and rolling. Then lumps of rocks were disturbed and bounded off, crashing down with a dust and a noise, before the whole slope above and below them seemed to move on the move. And they were sliding, huddling all together in fearful confusion of slipping and rattling, cracking in slabs and stones. It was the trees at the bottom that saved them. They slid into the edge of a climbing wood of pines that stood right up in the mountain slope, out for deeper and darker forests of valleys below. Some caught hold of the trunks and swung themselves to the lower branches. Some of them, like the little hobbit, got behind a tree to shelter from the onslaught of the rocks. Soon the danger was over. The slide had stopped, and the last faint crashes could be heard as large as the disturbing stones went bounding and spitting among the bracken and the pine roots far below. Well, that's got us a bit, saying Gandalf, and even goblins tracking us. That's well have a job to come down here quietly. I dare say, he grumbled Bumper, but they won't find it difficult to send stones bouncing down on our heads. And the dwarfs and Bilbo are feeling far happy. They were rubbing in their bruised and damaged legs and feet. Nonsense. We are going to turn aside here out path of the slide. We must be quick. Look at the light. The sun had gone long behind the mountains. Already the shadows were deepening about them. Though far away, through the trees and over the black tops of these growing lower down, they could still see the evening lights of the plains beyond. They limped along now as fast as they were able down the gentle slopes of a pine forest, and a slanting path leading steadily southwards. At times they were pushing through a sea of bracken with tall frogs rising right above the hobbit's head. At times they were marching along, quiet over a floor of pine needles. All while the forest gloom got heavier and the forest silence deeper. There was no wind that evening to bring even a sea sighting into the branches of the trees. Must we go further? Asked Bilbo, when it was so dark that you could only see just Thorin's beard wagging beside him, and so quiet that you could hear the dwarfs breathing like a loud noise. My toes are all bruised and bent, and my legs ache, and my stomach is wagging like an empty sack. A bit further, said Gandalf. After that seemed ages further. The sun, opened where no trees grew. The moon was up and shining in the clearing. Somehow it struck all of them as all a nice place, although there was nothing wrong to see. All of a sudden they heard a howl down the hill, and a strutting howl, answered by another to the right, and a good deal nearer them. Then another not far to the left. It was wolves howling at the moon. Wolves gathering together. There were no wolves living near Mr. Baggins' hole at home, but he knew the noise. He had had it described to him often enough in tales. One of his elder cousins, on the Tuke's side, who had been a great traveler, used to imitate it to frighten him. To hear it out of the forest under the moon was a bit too much for Bilbo. Even magic rings are not much use against wolves, especially against evil pack that lived under the shadow of goblin-infested mountains. Over the edge of the wild, on the borders of unknown, wolves of that sort smell keener than goblins, and do not need to see you catch you. What should we do now? What should we do? He cried. Escaping goblins to be caught by wolves, he said. It became a proverb, though we now say, out of the frying pan into the fire, in the same sort of uncomfortable situations. Up the trees quick, cried Gandalf, and they ran up to the trees at the very edge of the glade, hunting for those that had branches fairly low and were slender enough to swarm up. They found them as quick as they ever could. You can guess. Yes, and up they went, up as high as they could trust the branches. You would have laughed from a safe distance if you could see the dwarves sitting up in trees with their beards dangling down like old gentlemen gone, crackled and playing at being boys. Billy and Keely were at the top of a tall larch with it like an enormous Christmas tree. Dory, Nori, Ori, old and glowing, were more comfortable on a huge pine with irregular branches sticking at intervals like spokes of a wheel. Buford, Bulfer, Bumber, and Thorn were another. Dwalin and Balin had swarmed up a tall, slender fir with a few branches that were trying to find a place to sit in the greenery up top greenery of the topmost bolts. Gandalf, who was a great deal taller than the others, had found a tree which they could not climb, a large-scale pine. Standing at the edge of the glades, he was quite hidden in the boughs. But you could see his eyes gleaming in the moon as he peeped out, and Bilbo, he could not get into any tree, and was scuttling from trunk to trunk like a rabbit that had lost a hole. "You left the burglar behind again," said Nori to Dory, looking down. "I can always carry burglars on my back," said Dory. "Down tunnels and up trees. What do you think I am, a porter?" "Oh, I can't be always. I don't. Just read it slowly next time." "Alright. You'll be eaten if we don't do something," said Thor. For there were howls all around them now, getting nearer and nearer. "Dory," he cried, for Dory was the lowest down in the easiest tree. "Be quick and give Mr. Baggins a hand. Hand up." Dory was a decent fellow in spite of his grumbling. Poor Bilbo could not reach his hand even when he climbed down to the bottom branch. He hung his arm down as far as he could. Dory actually climbed out of the tree and let Bilbo scramble up and stand on his back. At that moment, the wolves trotted howling into the clearing. All of a sudden, there were hundreds of eyes. All of a sudden, there were hundreds. I would have gone more if there were hundreds of eyes. Oh, that's how you say that. Hey, it's been a long day for me. Hundreds of eyes looking at them. Still, Dory did not let Bilbo down. He waited still until he clambered off his shoulders into the branches, then jumped for the branches themselves. Only just out of time, the wolf snapped at his cloak as he swung up, and nearly got him. In a minute, there were a whole pack of them, yelping. Yelping all around the tree, leaping up to the trunk with their eyes blazing and tongues hanging out. But even the wild wargs, or so the evil wolves over the edge of the wild were named, cannot climb trees. For a time they were safe. Luckily it was warm and not windy. Trees are not very comfortable to sit in after a long time. But in the cold and the wind, with all the wolves was below you, they can be perfectly miserable places. This glade in the ring of trees was evidently a meeting place of the wolves. More and more crept in and left guards at the foot of the tree in which Dory and Bilbo were. They were sniffing about till they had smelt out every tree that had anyone in it, and these they guarded too, while they all rest. Hundreds and hundreds, it seemed, went and sat in a great circle in the glade, and in the middle of the circle was a great grey wolf. He spoke to them in a dreadful language of wargs. Gandalf understood it. Bilbo did not, but it sounded terrible to him. And if their talk was about as cruel and wicked things as it was, even now and then all the wargs in the circle would answer the great chief all together, and their dreadful clamor amongst almost made the hobbit fall out of his pine tree. I will tell you what Gandalf heard, though Bilbo did not understand it. The wargs and goblins often help one another in their wicked deeds. Goblins did not usually venture very far from their mountains, unless they were driven out or looking for new homes, or are marching to war, which I am glad to say that has not happened for a long while. But in those days, they sometimes used to go on raids, especially to get food or slaves to work for them. Then they often got the wargs to help and shared the plunder with them. Sometimes they rode on wolves like men do on horses. Now it seemed that a great goblin raid had been planned for that night. The wargs had come down to meet the goblins, and the goblins were late. For the reason, no doubt, was the death of the great goblin, and all the excitement caused by the dwarves and Bilbo and the wizard, for whom they were probably still hunting. In spite of the dangers of this far land, bold men had late been making their way back into it from the south, cutting down trees and building themselves places to live, even among the more pleasant woods in the valleys along the river shores. There were many of them, and they were brave and well armed. Even the wargs dared not attack them if they were still many together, or in the bright day. But now they had planned with the goblins to help come by night upon some of the villages nearest the mountains. If their plans had been carried out, there would have been none left there next day. All would have been killed, except the few the goblins kept from the wolves and carried back as prisoners to their caves. This was all dreadful talk to listen to, not only because of the brave woodmen and their wives and children, but also the danger which now threatened Gandalf and his friends. The warlocks were angry and puzzled finding them in their meeting place, as they thought they were friends of the woodmen and were to come to spy on them. They would not take their news of plans down into the valleys, and then the goblins and wolves would have a terrible battle instead of capturing the prisoners and devouring people wake suddenly from their sleep. The warlocks had no intention of going away or letting people up the trees escape. At any rate, until morning, and before long they said goblin soldiers would be coming down from the mountains. Goblins can climb trees or cut them down. Now you understand why Gandalf, listening to the growling and yelping, began to be dreadfully afraid. Wizard though he was, and to feel that they were in a very bad place, and had not escaped at all. All the same, he was not going to let them have it all their own way, though he could not do very much stuck up in a tall tree with wolves all around the ground below. He gathered the huge pine cones from the branches of his tree. Then he set one alight with a bright blue flame and threw it whizzing down amongst the circle of wolves. It struck one on the back, and immediately his staggery coat caught fire. It was leaping up, yelping horribly. Then another came, and another. There were blue flames, one red, another green. They burst on the ground in the middle of the circle and went off colored sparks and smokes. Especially a large one hit the chief of the wolf on the nose, and he leapt in the air 10 feet, then rushed round and round in circle, biting and snapping, even at the other wolves in his anger and fright. The dwarves and Bilbo shouted and cheered. The rage of the wolves was terrible to see, and the communication and they filled all the forest. Wolves are afraid of fire at all times. But this was the most horrible and uncanny fire. If a spark got in their coats, it struck and burned onto them, and unless they rolled over quick, they were soon all in flames. Very soon, all about the glade, wolves were rolling over, put out the sparks in their backs, while those were burning were running away, howling and setting others alight, till their friends chased them away, and they fled down the slopes, crying and yammering and looking for water. All right. More water. What's all this uproar in the forest tonight? Said the Lord of the Eagles. He was sitting black in the moonlight atop of a lonely pinnacle of a rock on the eastern edge of the mountains. I hear wolves' voices. Are goblins' mischief in the woods? He swept up in the air, and immediately 2 of his guards from the rocks at either hand leaped up following him. They circled up in the sky and looked down upon the ring of wargs, a tiny spot far below, but the eagles have keen eyes and can see small things at a great distance. The Lord of the Eagles of the Misty Mountains had eyes that could look like the sun unblinking, and you can see a rat. Oh, I see a rabbit. Okay, that makes more sense. See a rabbit moving on the ground a mile below, even in the moonlight. So though he could not see the people in the trees, he could make out the commotion among the wolves and see tiny flashes of fire You hear howling and yelping and come up faint from far beneath. Also, he could see the glint of the moon and the goblin spears and helmets along lines of the wicked folk crept down the hillside from their gate and wound into the wood. Eagles are not kindly birds. Some are cowardly and cruel. But the ancient race of the northern mountains were the greatest of all birds. They were proud and strong and noble-hearted. They did not love goblins or fear them, whenever they took any notice of them at all, which was seldom, for they did not eat such creatures. They swooped on them and drove them shrieking back into their caves and stopped whatever wickedness they were doing. The goblins hated the eagles and feared them, but could not reach their lofty nests or drive them from the mountains. Tonight, the Lord of the Eagles was filled with curiosity to know what was afoot. So he summoned many other eagles to him, and they flew down the mountains, slowly circling around and round. They came down towards the ring of wolves and the meeting place of the goblins. A very good thing, too. Dreadful things are going on down there. The wolves that had caught fire had fled into the forest and had set aloft in several places. Alit, set it alit, not aloft. Loft is flying, alit is setting things on fire. This has been your Rainier thing of the week. In several places, it was high summer. On this eastern side of the mountain, there had been little rain for some time. Yellow breaking, falling branches, deep pill pine needles, here and there dead trees were soon in flames. All around the clearing of the wargs, fire was leaping, but the wolf guards did not leave the trees. Maddening in anger, they were leaping and howling around the trunks and cursing the dwarves in their horrible language, with their tongues hanging out, their eyes shining red and fierce as the flames. Then suddenly the goblins came running up yelling. They thought a battle with the woodman was going on. But they soon learned that what really happened. Some of them actually sat down and laughed. Others waved their spears, clashed the shafts against their shield. Goblins were not afraid of fire. And they had a plan that seemed most amusing. Some got all the wolves together in a pack. Some stacked fern and brushwood round tree trunks. Others rushed round, stamped and beat and stamped until all the flames were put out. But they did not put out the fire nearest the trees where the dwarves were. That fire they fed leaves and dead branches and bracken. Soon they had a ring of smoke and flame round the dwarves, a ring which they had kept from spreading outwards, but closed it slowly in. Still the running fire was licking the fuel piled under the trees. Smoke was in Bilbo's eyes. He could feel the heat of the flames, though the reek he could see goblins dancing round and round in a circle like people round in a midsummer's bonfire. Outside the ring, dancing warriors with spear and axe stood the wolves at a respectable distance, watching and waiting. You could hear the goblins beginning a horrible song. 15 birds in fire trees, their feathers were fanned in a fiery breeze, but funny little birds, they had no wings. Oh, what should we do with funny little things? Roast them alive or stew them in a pot? Fry them, boil them, or eat them hot? Then they stopped and shouted out, "Fly away, little birds! Fly away if you can! Come down, little birds, or you'll get roasted in your nests. Sing, little bird! Sing, little birds! Why don't you sing?" "Go away, little boys!" shouted Gandalf in this answer. "It isn't bird nesting time." "Also, naughty little boys that play with fire get punished," he said. He said to make them angry and to show them he was not frightened of them. Though of course he was, wizard though he was, but they took no notice and they were on singing.
Burn, burn the tree and fern, shrivel and scorch, and frizzle torch, to light the night of our delight. Yah-hey! Bake and toast him, fry and roast him, till birds and blaze and eyes glaze, till hair smells and skin cracks, fat melts and bones black, and cinders lie beneath the sky. So dwarfs shall die and light the night for our delight. Yah-hey! Yah-hooray! Yah-ho! And with the Yah-ho, the flames were under Gandalf's tree. In that moment, it spread to the others. The bark caught fire and the lower branches cracked. Then Gandalf climbed to the top of his tree. Then sudden splendor flashed from his wand like lightning, and he got ready to spring down with a high ray among the spears of goblins. That would have been the end of him, though. He probably would have been killed many of them as he had come down hurling like a thunderbolt. But he never leaped. Just at that moment, the Lord of Eagles swept down above and seized him with his talons, and he was gone. There was a howl of anger and surprise from the goblins. Loud cried the king of the Lord of the Eagles, to whom Gandalf had now spoken. Back swept the great birds that were with him, and down came like huge black shadows. The wolves yammering and gnashed their teeth. The goblins yelled and stamped with rage, and flung with heavy spears in the air in vain. Over them swooped the eagles, the dark rush of their beating wings smote them to the floor and drove them away. Their talons tore at goblin faces. Other birds flew to the treetops, seized the dwarves, who were now scrambling up now as far as they ever dared to go. Poor Bilbo was nearly left behind, again. He just managed to catch hold of Dory's leg, as Dory had borne off last of all, and they were together above the tumult and burning. Bilbo swinging in the air with his hands nearly breaking. Now far below, the goblins and wolves were scattering far and wide in the woods. A few eagles were circling and sweeping above the battleground. The flames above the trees sprang suddenly up the highest branches. They went crackling with fire. There were sudden and furious sparks and smoke. Bilbo had escaped only just in time. Soon the light of the burning was faint below, a red twinkle on the black floor. And they were high up in the sky, rising all the time in strong sweeping circles. Bilbo never got that flight. Clinging to Dory's ankles, he moaned, "Oh, my arms, my arms!" But Dory groaned, "My poor legs, my poor legs!" At the best of times, height made Bilbo giddy. He used to turn queer if he looked over the edge of a little cliff. He had never liked ladders, let alone trees. Never having to escape from wolves before. So you can imagine how his head swam now when he looked down between his dangling toes and saw the dark lands opening wide underneath him, touched here and there with the light of the moon on a hillside of rock or a steam in the plains. The pale peaks of the mountain were coming nearer, moonlit spikes of a rock sticking out from the black shadows. Summer or not, it seemed very cold. He shut his eyes and wondered if they could hold on any longer. Then he imagined what would happen if he did not, and he felt sick. The flight ended only just in time for him, just before his arms gave way. He loosened Dory's ankles with a gasp and fell onto the rough platform of the Eagle's Eyrie. There he lay without speaking, and his thoughts were a mixture of surprise at being saved from the fire and fear lest he fell off the narrow place in the deep shadows on either side. He's feeling very queer indeed, eating his head by that time after the dreadful adventures of the last 3 days, with next to nothing to eat. He found himself saying aloud, "Now I know what a piece of bacon feels like when it's suddenly picked out of the pan on a fork and put on a shelf." "No, you don't," he heard Dory answered, "because the bacon knows it'll get back in the pan sooner or later, and it is to be hoped we shan't. Also, eagles aren't forks." "Oh no, not a bit like storks. Forks, I mean," said Bilbo, sitting up a little anxiously at the eagle who was perched close by. He was wondering what other nonsense he had been saying.
eagle could get rude. You ought not to be rude to an eagle. When you are only the size of a hobbit, and up in his eyrie at night, the eagle only sharpened his beak on a stone and trimmed his feathers and took no notice. Soon another eagle flew up. The Lord of the Eagle bids you to bring your prisoners to the great shelf, he cried, and was off again. The other seized Dorian's claws and flew up to get away with him in the night, leaving Bilbo all alone. He had just strength to wonder what the messenger had meant by prisoners, and began to think of being torn for supper like a rabbit when his turn had come. The eagle came back, seized him in his talons at the back of his coat, and swooped off. This time he only flew a short way. Very soon Bilbo was laid down, trembling with fear, on a wide shelf of rock on the mountainside. There was no path on it save by flying, and no path down except by jumping in over a precipice. So that's how that's spelled. Okay. There he found all the others sitting with their backs on the mountain wall. The Lord of the Eagles was also there, speaking to Gandalf. It seemed that Bilbo was not going to be eaten after all. The wizard and the Eagle Lord appeared to know one another slightly, and even to be on friendly terms. As a matter of fact, Gandalf, who had been in the mountains, had once rendered a service to the Eagles and healed the Lord from an arrow wound. So you see, prisoners had meant prisoners rescued from goblins only, and not captives of the Eagles. As Bilbo listened to the talk of Gandalf, he realized that at last they were going to escape and really, truly from the dreadful mountains. As he was discussing plans with the great eagle for carrying the dwarves, himself and Bilbo far away and settling down well on their journey across the plains below, the Lord of the Eagles would not take them anywhere near where man lived. They would shoot at us with their great bows of yew, he said, for they would think we were after their sheep, and at other times they were right. No, we were glad to cheat the goblins of their sport, and glad to repair thanks to you. But we will not risk ourselves for dwarves in the southward plains. Very well, said Gandalf. Take us where as far as you will. We're already deeply obliged to you. But in the meantime, we are famished with hunger. I'm nearly dread of it, said Bilbo in a weak little voice that nobody heard. That can perhaps be mended, said the Lord of the Eagles. Later on, you might have seen a bright fire on the shelf of the rock, and figures of dwarves and round cooking it and making a fire, fine roasting smell. The Eagles had brought up dry roots of fuel, and they had brought rabbits, hares, small sheep. The dwarves managed all the preparations. Bilbo was too weak to help, and he was not good at skinning rabbits or cutting up meat, being used to having it delivered by the butcher, all ready to cook. Gandalf, too, was lying down after doing his part in the setting fire. And setting the fire going, since Ord and Glorn had lost their tinder boxes. Dwarves have never taken to matches even yet. So ended the adventures of the Misty Mountain. Soon Bilbo's stomach was feeling full and comfortable again, and he felt he could sleep contentedly. Though really he would have liked a little loaf and butter better than bits of meat toasted on sticks. He slept curled up on the hard rock more soundly than ever he had done on his feather bed in his own little home. But all night he dreamed of his own house, wandering in his little sleep into his different rooms, looking for something that he could not find nor remember what it looked like. Alright. Hours. Yes. Nothing concerns. Alright. Chapter 7. Queer Lodgings. The next morning, Bilbo woke up with the early sun in his eyes.
He jumped up to look at the time and go and put his kettle on and found he was not at home at all. So he sat down and wished in vain for a wash and a brush. He did not get either, nor tea, nor toast, nor bacon for his breakfast, only cold mutton and a rabbit. And after that he had to get ready for a fresh start. This time he was allowed to climb on the eagle's back and cling to his wings. The air rushed over him and he shut his eyes. The dwarves were crying farewells and promising to repay the Lord of the Eagles if they ever could, as as off rose 15 great birds from the mountainside. The sun was still close to the eastern ridge of things. The mountain was cool, and the mists were in the valleys, in hollows, entwined here, and there were about peaks and pinnacles of hills. Bilbo opened an eye to peep and saw that birds were already high up, and the world was far away, and the mountains were falling back behind them into the distance. He shut his eyes again and held on tighter. "Don't pinch," said the eagle. "You do not need to be frightened like a rabbit, even if you look like one. It is a fair morning with little wind. What is finer than flying?" Bilbo would have liked to say, "A warm bath and a little late breakfast on the lawn afterwards." But he thought better and to say nothing at all and let his clutch just a little bit. After a good while, the eagles must have seen the point where they were making for, even from their great height, for they began to go down, circling round in great spirals. They did this for a long while. At last, the hobbit opened his eyes again. The earth was much nearer, and below them were trees that looked like oaks and elms, and wide grasslands, and a river running through it all, but cropping out of the ground right in the path of a stream which looped itself about was a great rock, almost a hill of stone, like it was an outpost of the distant mountains, where a huge peaks cast miles into the plain by some giant among giants. Quickly now, at the top of this rock, the eagles swooped one by one and set down their passengers. "Farewell," they cried, "wherever you fare till your ears receive at your journey's hand." This is a polite way of. This is the polite thing to say among eagles. "May the wind under your wings bear you where the sun sails and the moon walks," answered Gandalf, who knew the correct reply. Oh, that was a fun sneeze. Thankfully, I got to the mute button just in time. And so they parted. And though the Lord of the Eagles became in after days the king of all birds and wore a golden crown and his 15 chieftains' gold collars made of gold that the dwarves gave them, Bilbo never saw them again, except high and far off in battle of the five armies. But that comes to the end of this tale, and we shall not say more of that just now. Shh. There was a flat space on the top of the hill of stone and well-worn path with many stops leading it down across which a ford of huge flat stones led to the grassland beyond the stream. There was a little cave, a wholesome one with a pebbly floor, at the foot of the steps and near the end of a stony ford. Here the party gathered and discussed what must be done. "I always meant to see Earl as safe as possible over the mountains," said the wizard, "and now by good management and good luck I have done it. Indeed, we are now within a good deal further east than I have ever meant to come with you. For after all, this is not my adventure. I may look in on it again, but this is all over. But in the meanwhile, I have something about pressing business to attend to." The dwarves groaned and looked a little distressed, and Bilbo wept. They had begun to think Gandalf was going to come all the way and would always be there to help them out of the difficulties. "I'm not going to disappear this very instant," he said. "I can give you a day or two more. Probably I can help you out of the way of the present plight. I need a little help myself. We have no food and no baggage, no ponies to ride, and you don't know where you are. Now I can tell you what, we are still some miles north of the path which you should be following. If you have not let the mountain pass in a hurry, very few people live in these parts, unless they have come here since I had last down this way, which is some years ago. But there is somebody that I know who lives not far away. That somebody made the steps of the great rock, Karok. Karok. Yeah, we're gonna go with Karok. I believe he calls it. He does not come here often, certainly not in the daytime. It is not good waiting for him. In fact, it may be dangerous. We must go and find him. And if all goes well at our meeting, I think I shall be off. And wish you like eagles farewell wherever you fare. They begged him not to leave. They offered him dragon gold and silver and jewels, but he would not change his mind. We shall see. We shall see, he said. And I think I have earned already some of your dragon gold when you've got it. After that, they stopped pleading, and then they took off their clothes and bathed in the river, which was shallow and clear and stony at the ford. When they had dried in the sun, which was now strong and warm, they were refreshed, if still a little sore and a little hungry. Soon they crossed the ford, carrying the hobbit, and then began to march through the long and green grass and down the lines, wide arm of oaks and tall elms. Why is it called the Karok? Asked Bilbo as he went along with the wizard's side. He called it the Karok because Karok, in his word for it, is his word for it. He calls things like that Karoks and that thing's a Karok because it's the only one near his home and he knows it well. Who calls it? Who knows it? There's somebody I speak, a very great person. You must be very polite when I introduce you. I shall introduce you slowly, 2 by 2, I think. You must be careful not to annoy him, for heavens knows what will happen. He can be appalling when he is angry, though he is kind enough to be humored. Still, I warned you, he gets angry easily. The dwarves all gathered around when they heard the wizard talking like this to Bilbo. Is that the person you are taking to us now? Couldn't you find someone more easily tempered? Hadn't you better explain a bit clearer and so on? Yes, it certainly is. No, I could not, and I was explaining very carefully, said the wizard crossly. If you must know, his name is Beorn. Beorn. I'm going to call it Beorn. Beorn. He is very strong, and he is a skin changer. What, a furrier? A man that calls rabbits conies, and he doesn't turn their skins into squirrels? Gracious, no. Good gracious heavens, no. Don't be a fool, Mr. Baggins, if you can help it. And in the name of all wonder, don't mention the word furrier again, as long as you're within 100 miles of his house. Nor rug, cape, tippet, muff, nor any of such unfortunate word. He is a skin changer. He changes his skins. Sometimes he is a huge black bear. Sometimes he's a great, strong, black-haired man with huge arms and a great beard. I cannot tell you more, though that ought to be enough. Some say that he is a bear descended from the great and ancient bears in the mountains that lived there before the giants came. Others say that he is a man descended from the first man, and who lived before Smaug and the other dragons came to this part of the world, and before the goblins came into the hills out of the north. I cannot say, though I fancy the last is the true tale. He is not the sort of person to ask questions of. At any rate, he is under no enchantment but his own. He lives in an oak wood in a great wooden house. As a man, he keeps the cattle and horses, which are nearly as marvelous as himself. They work and talk to him. He does not eat them, neither does he hunt or eat wild animals. He keeps hives and hives of great fierce bees, and lives most on cream and honey. As a bear, he ranges far and wide. I once saw him sitting alone on top of the Karok at night, watching the moon sinking towards the misty mountains. I heard him growl in the tongues of bears. The day will come when they will perish, and I shall be back. That is why I believe he once came from the mountain himself. Bilbo and the dwarves had plenty to think about, and they had no more questions. They still had a long way to walk before them. Up slope and down dale they plodded. It grew very hot. Sometimes they rested under the trees, and then Bilbo felt so angry that he could have eaten acorns if any had been ripe enough yet to have fallen to the ground. It was the middle of the afternoon before they noticed the great patches of flowers had begun to spring up, all the same kinds, growing together as though they were planted. Especially there was clover, waving patches of cockscomb clover and purple clover, wide stretches of short, white, sweet honey-smelling clover. There was buzzing and whirring and droning in the air. Bees were busy everywhere. And such bees, Bilbo had never seen anything like them. If one were to sting me, he thought, I shall swell up as big again as I am. They were bigger than hornets. As someone who has an unnatural fear of bees, this next little bit's gonna be so much fun. They were bigger than hornets. The drones were bigger than your thumb, and a good deal in the bands of and a good deal. And the bands of yellow on their deep black bodies shone like a fiery gold. We are getting nearer, said Gandalf. We are on the edge of his bee pastures. After a while, they came to a belt of a tall and very ancient oaks, and beyond on these to a high thorn and hedge through which you can neither see nor scramble. You had better wait here, said the wizard to the dwarves, and when I call or whistle, begin to come after me. You'll see the way I go, but only in pairs, mind you. About 5 minutes between each pair of you. Bombur is the fastest and will do for 2. You better come alone and last. Come on, Mr. Baggins. There is a gate somewhere around this way. With that, he went off along the hedge, taking the frightened hobbit with him. They soon came to a wooden gate, high and broad, beyond which they could see gardens and a cluster of low wooden buildings, some thatched and made on shaped logs, barns, stables, sheds, and a long, low wooden house. Inside one of the southward side of the great hedge were rows and rows of hives with bell-shaped tops made of straw, and the noise of giant bees flying to and fro and crawling in and out filled all the air. The wizard and the hobbit pushed upon the open, heavy, creaking gate and went down a wide track towards the houses. Some horses, very sleek and well-groomed, trotted up across the grass and looked at them intently with very intelligent faces. Then off they galloped to the buildings. They've gone to tell him of the arrival of strangers, said Gandalf. Soon they reached the courtyard, 3 walls of which were formed by the wooden house and 2 long wings. In the middle there were lying a great oak trunk with lopped branches beside it. Standing near was a huge man with a thick black beard and hair, great bare arms and legs with knotted muscles. He was clothed in a tunic of wool down to his knees, and he was leaning on an axe. The horses were standing by him, their nose at his shoulder. Ugh, here they are, he said to the horses. They don't look dangerous. You can be off, he laughed, with a great rolling laugh. Put down his axe and came forward. Who are you, and what do you want? He said gruffly, standing there in front of them, towering tall above Gandalf. As for Bilbo, he could easily have trotted through his legs without ducking his head to miss the fringe of a man's brown tunic. I am Gandalf, said the wizard. Never heard of him, growled the man. And what's this little fellow? Said, stooping down to frown at the hobbit with his bushy eyebrows. That is Mr. Baggins, a hobbit of a good fellow and unimpeachable reputation, said Gandalf. Bilbo bowed. He had no hat to take off, and this was painfully conscious of his many missing buttons. I'm a wizard, continued Gandalf. I have heard of you. If you have not heard of me, perhaps you have heard of my great cousin. Perhaps you have heard of my great cousin, Radagast, who lives on the southern borders of Mirkwood. Yes, not a bad fellow as wizards go, I believe. I used to see him now and again. Well, now I know who you are, and who you say you are, and what you want. To tell you the truth, We have lost our luggage, and nearly lost our way, and are rather in need of help, or at least advice. I must say we have had rather a bad time with goblins in the mountains. Goblins, said the big man, less gruffy. Oh ho, so you've been having trouble with them, have you? Why did you go near them for? How we did not mean to. They surprised us at night in a pass, which we had to cross. We were coming out of the lands over west into these countries. It is a long tale. Then you had better come inside and tell me some of it. It won't take all day, said the man, leading him the way through a dark door that opened out of the courtyard into the house. Following him, they found themselves in a wide hall with the fireplace in the middle. Though it was summer and there was some firewood burning, the smoke rising to the blackened rafters in the search of a way out through the open in the roof. They passed through the dim hall lit only by the fire and hole above. It came through another smaller door into a sort of veranda. There we go. Propped up on wooden posts made of single tree trunks. It faced south, and there was still warm filled with the lights moved to the western sun, which had slanted it and fell golden onto the gate, or fell golden on the garden full of flowers that came right up to the steps. Here they sat on wooden benches while Gandalf began his tale, and Bilbo swung his dangling legs, looked at the flowers of the garden, wondering what their names could be, as he had never seen half of them before. I was coming over the mountains with a fret or two. I can only see one. And a little one at that. Well, to tell you the truth, I did not like to bother you with a lot of us until I found out if you were busy. I will give a call if I may. Go on, call. So Gandalf gave a long swirl whistle, and presently a Thorin and Dory came round the house by the garden path and stood bowing low before them. 1 or 3 I might see, but these aren't hobbits, these are dwarves. Thorin Oakenshield at your service. Dory at your service, the 2 dwarves bowing. I do not need your service, thank you, said Borin. But I expect you need mine. I am not over fond of dwarves, but it is true. But if it is true that you are Thorin, son of Therin, son of Thor. Is it Thro? Like Thor? Yeah, I'll do it. I believe that your companion is most respectful, and your enemies of goblins are not in the way of mischief in my lands. What are you up to, by the way? They are on their ways to visit the land of their fathers, away east beyond Mirkwood. It's putting Gandalf. It is entirely by accident that we are in your lands at all. We were crossing by the high pass that should have brought us to the road that lies to the south of your country, when we were attacked by the evil goblins. As I was about to tell you. Go on telling then, said Borin, who was never very polite. There was a terrible storm, the stone giants were out, hurling rocks at the head of the pass as took refuge in a cave. The Hobbit and I and several of our companions. Do you call 2 several? Well, no, as a matter of fact, there were more than 2. Where are they? Killed? Eaten? Gone home? Well, no. They don't seem all to have come when I whistled. Shy, I expect. You see, we are very much afraid that we are rather a lot for you to entertain. Go on, whistle again. I am in for a party, it seems. 1 or 2 won't make a difference, growled Boring. Gandalf whistled again, but Nori and Ori were there almost before he stopped. For if you remember, Gandalf had told them to come in pairs every 5 minutes. Hello, you came pretty quick. Were you hiding? Come on, my jack-in-the-boxes. Nori at your service. Ori at... They began, but Borin interrupted. Thank you. When I want your help, I will ask for it. Sit down and let's get on with this tale, or it will be supper time before it is ended. As soon as we were asleep, a crack at the back of the cave opened, went on Gandalf. Goblins came out and grabbed the hobbit, the dwarves, and their troop of ponies, What are you? What were you, a traveling circus? Or were you carrying lots of goods? Or did you always kill 6 a troop? Oh no, as a matter of fact, there were more than 6 ponies. There were more than 6 of us, and well, here are 2 more. And just at that moment, Ballin and Dwalin. Did I call him Dwalin? I think I said Dwalin, not Dwalin. I am forgetting how I read this name the first time. But Dwalin appeared, bowed so low their beards swept on the stone floor. The big man was frowning at first, but they did their best to be frighteningly polite and kept nodding and bending and bowing, waving their hoods before their knees in proper dwarf fashion. Still, he stopped frowning and burst out into a crackle laughing. He looked so comical. Troop was right, a frank comic one. Come in, my merry men, and what are your names? I don't want your service just now, only your names, and then sit down and stop wagging. Balin and Dwalin, they said, and not daring to be offended, and sat on the floor looking rather surprised. Now go on again. Oh yes. Oh, where was I? Oh yes. I was not grabbed. I killed a goblin or 2 with a flash. Good, growled Borin. It seemed some good being a wizard then. And it slipped inside the crack before it closed. I followed them down the main hall, which was crowded with goblins. The great goblin was... There were 30 or 40 armed guards. I thought to myself, even if they were not all chained together, what can a dozen do against so many? A dozen? That's the first time I've heard 8 call a dozen. Dozen, or have you still got some jacks that you haven't come out of their boxes? Well, there seem to be a couple more now. Freely and Keely, I believe, said Gandalf, and there were as these 2 now appeared. That's enough. Sit down, be quiet. Now go on, Gandalf. So Gandalf went on with the tale until he came to the fight in the dark, the discovery of the lower gate, and their horror when they found Mr. Baggins had been mislaid. We encountered ourselves and found that there were no hobbit. There were 14 of us left. 14. That's the first time I've heard 1 from 10 leave 14. You mean 9? And or else you haven't told me yet all the names of your party. Well, of course. You haven't seen Owen and Glonia, and bless me, there they are. I hope you will forgive them for bothering you. Oh yes, let them all come. Hurry up, come along, you 2. Sit down. Look here, Gandalf. Even now, you've only got yourself and 10 dwarves and the hobbit that is lost. That makes 11 plus 1 mislead. Plus 1 mislead. And not 14, unless wizards count differently to other people. Now please get on with the tale. Borin did not show it more than he could help, but it really begun to get very interested. You see, in the old days, as he had known the very part of the mountains that Gandalf was describing, he nodded and growled when he heard the hobbit's reappearance, and that the Skers scrambled down the side about the stone slide, and the wolf ring in the woods. When Gandalf came to their climbing into the trees with the wolves all underneath, he got up and strode underneath. I wish I had been there. I would have given them great more than fireworks. Well, said Gandalf, very glad to see that his tale was making good impression. I did the best I could, and they were with the wolves getting mad underneath us, and the forest getting to blaze in places. When the goblins came down from the hills and discovered us, they yelled with their delight and sang songs, making fun of us. 15 birds for 5 fir trees. Good heavens, don't pretend that the goblins can't count. And 12 isn't 15, and they know it, and so do I. There were Bifur and Bolfur as well. I haven't ventured to introduce them before, and there they are. In came Bifur and Bolfur, and me, Bulmergus, puffing up behind him. He's fat and angry at being left behind till last. He refused to wait 5 minutes and followed immediately after the other 2. Well, now there are 15 among you, and since the goblins can count, I suppose that is all that there were up in the trees now. Perhaps we can finish this story without any more interruptions. Mr. Baggins saw how clever Gandalf had been. The interruptions had really made Borin more interested in the story, and the story had kept him from sending the dwarves off at once like suspicious beggars. He never invited people into his house, if he could help it. He had very few friends, and they lived quite a good way from here. He never invited more than a couple of those to his house at a time. Now he had 15 strangers sitting in his porch. By the time the wizard had finished his tale and told the eagle's rescue and how they had all been brought to the Karok when the sun had fallen behind the peaks of the Messy Mountains and the shadows were long in Burin's garden, a very good tale. The best I've heard for a long while. If all beggars could tell such a good one, they might find me a kinder. You may be making it all up, of course, but you deserve supper for the story all the same. Let's have you something to eat. Yes, please, they said all together. Thank you very much. Inside the hall, it was now quite dark. Burin clapped his hands and it trotted 4 beautiful white ponies and several large gray dogs. Body gray dogs. Burin said something to them in a queer language, like animal noises turned to talk. They went out again and soon came back carrying torches in their mouths, which they lit the fire and stuck in low brackets and pillars of the hall about the central hearth. The dogs could not stand on their hind legs when they wished and carried things with their forefront. Quickly they got out boards and trestles from the side walls and set them under their fire. Then ba 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 was heard, and in came some sort of snow-white sheep, led by a large coal-black lamb. One bore a white cloak embodied at the edges with figures of animals, and other bore on their broad backs trays with bowls and plasters and knives and wooden spoons, which dogs took and quickly laid on the trestle table. These were very low enough, even for Bilbo to sit comfortably. Beside them, Pony pushed 2 large seated benches with wide rush bottoms and little stacked thick legs for Gandalf and Thorin wool at the fair end. And he put Burin's thick black chair at some sort, in which he sat with his great legs stuck far out under the table. I'm stretch for a little bit. Alright, on the table. These were all chairs he had in his hall, and he probably had them low like tables for convenience of the wonderful animals that waited on him. What did the rest sit on? They were not forgotten. The other ponies came in, rolling some drum-shaped sections of log, smooth and polished, and low enough even for Bilbo. Soon, though, they were all seated at Burin's table, and the hall had not seen such a gathering for many a year. There they had supper or dinner, such as they had not had since they left the last homely house in the west, and said goodbye to Elrond. The light of the torches and the fire flickered about them. On the table there were 2 small red beeswax candles. All the time they ate, Burin in his deep rolling voices told tales of the wild lands on this side of the mountains, especially of the dark, dangerous wood that lay outstretched far north and south, a day's ride before them. Bearing in their way to the east the terrible forest of Mirkwood. The dwarves listened and shook their beards, for they knew that they must soon venture to that forest, and that after the mountains it was worse. It was the worst of the perils they had to pass before coming to the dragon's stronghold. When dinner was over, they began to tell tales of their own, but Burin seemed to be growing drowsy and paid little heed to them. They spoke most of gold and silver and jewels, and the making of things by smithcraft, and Burin did not appear to care for such things. There were no things of gold or silver in his hall, and few save the knives that were made of metal at all. They sat long at the table with their wooden drinking bowls filled with mead. The dark night came on the outside. The fires in the middle of the hall were built with fresh logs, and torches were put out, and still they sat in the light and danced of the dancing flames of the pillars of the house getting tall, all behind them, the dark at the top like trees of the forest. Whether it was magic or not, it seemed so, Bilbo. No, not so, too. Why did I think that was an S? It seemed to Bilbo that he heard a sound like wind in the branches stirring in the rafters, like a hoot of owls. Soon he began to nod with sleep, but his voices seemed to grow far away until he woke with a start. The great door had been creaked and slammed. Borin was gone, and the dwarves were sitting cross-legged on the floor, round fire. Presently, they began to sing. Some of the verses were like this, but there were many more, and their singing went on for a while. The wind was on the withered heath, but in the forest stirred no leaf. Their shadows lay by night and day, and dark things silent crept beneath. The wind came down from mountains cold, and like a tide it roared and rolled. The branches groaned, and branches groaned, the forest mowed, and leaves were laid on the mounds. The wind went on far. The wind went from west to east. All movements in the forest ceased, but shrill and harsh across the marsh, its whistling voices were released. The grasses hissed and the tassels bent. The reeds were rattling and went on. O'er a shaking pool underneath heaven's cool. Oh, where heaven, oh, not heaven, where racing clouds were torn and rent. It passed the lowly mountain bare and swept above the dragon's lair. There were black and dark lay boulders stark, and the flying smoke was in air. Left the world and took flight over the world seas of night. The moon set sail upon the gale, and the stars were fanned the leaping light. Bilbo began to nod again. Suddenly up stood Gandalf. "It is time for us to sleep," he said. "For us, but not, I think, Borin. In this hall we rest safe and sound, but I must warn you not to forget what Borin has said before he left us. You must not stray outside until the sun is up on your own peril." Bilbo found the beds had already been laid at the side of the hall, on a sort of raised platform beneath the pillars in the outer wall. For him, there was a little mattress of straw and woolen blankets. He snuggled onto them very gladly in summertime, and though it was, the fire burned low and he fell asleep. Yet, in the night he woke. The fire had now sunk into a few embers. The dwarves and Gandalf were still asleep. Asleep to judge by their breathing. A splash of white on the floor came from the high moon, which was peering down through the smoke hole in the roof. There was a little growling sound outside, and a noise as great of some great animal scuffling up the door. Bilbo wondered what it was, and whether it could be Borin in enhanced shape, and if he would come back as a bear and kill them. He dived under the blankets and hid his head and fell asleep again, at last in spite of his fears. It was full morning when he woke. One of the dwarves had fallen over him in the shadows where he lay, and had rolled with a bump from the platform onto the floor. It was Bulfur. He was grumbling about it. Then Bilbo opened his eyes. "Get up, lazy bones," he said, "or there will be no breakfast for you." Up jumped Bilbo. "Breakfast?" he said. "Where's breakfast?" Mostly inside us," answered the other dwarves who were moving around the hall. "But what is left out on the Vandra? We've been looking for one ever since the sun got up, but there is no sign of him anywhere. Though we have found breakfast laid as soon as we went out." "But where is Gandalf?" asked Bilbo, moving to find something. Out and about somewhere," they told him. But he saw no sign of the wizard at all that day until evening. Just before the sun set, he walked into the hall, where the hobbit and the other dwarves were having supper, waited on by Borin's wonderful animals, as they'd been all day. But Beorn they had seen and heard nothing since the night before, and they were getting puzzled. "Where's our host? And where have you been all day?" they cried. One question at a time, and none till after supper. I haven't had a bite to eat since breakfast. At last Gandalf pushed away his plate and chugged and had eaten 2 whole leaves with masses of butter and honey and clotted cream, and drank at least a quart of mead and took out his pipe. I will answer the second question first, he said. Bless me, this is a splendid place for smoking rings. Indeed, for a long time they could get nothing more out of him. So busy sending smoke rings, dodging round pillars through the hall, changing them in all sorts of different shapes and colors, and setting them at last chasing one another out of the hole of the roof. They must have looked very queer from the outside, popping out into the air. Another green, another blue, red, silver, gray, yellow, white. Big ones, little ones dodging through the big ones, and joining into figure eights and going off like a flock of birds into the distance. I've been picking out bear tracks, he said at last. There must have been a regular bears meeting outside here last night. I soon saw that Baron could not have made them at all, and they were too far away. Many of them, and they were various sizes too. I should say that there were little bears, large bears, ordinary bears, gigantic big bears, all dancing outside from dark to nearly dawn. They came almost from every direction, except from the west over the river from the mountains. In that direction, only one set of footprints led nothing. Only one goes away from here. I followed these as far as the Karok, and they disappeared into the river. The water was too deep and strong beyond the rock for me to cross. It's easy enough, as you remember, to get from this bank to the Karok by a ford, but on the other side is a cliff, standing up from a swirling channel. I had to walk miles before I had found a place where the river was wide and shallow enough for me to wade and swim, and then miles back to pick up tracks again. By that time, it was too late for me to follow them farther. They went straight off in directions of the pine woods and on the east side of the Misty Mountains, where we had our pleasant little party with the Rogues the night before. And now I think I have answered your first question too, ended Gandalf. And he sat at a long while silent. Bilbo thought he knew what the wizard meant. What shall he do? He cried. If he leads all the wargs and goblins down here, we'll all be caught and killed. I thought you said that he was not a friend of theirs. So I did. Don't be silly. And you better go to bed. Your wits are sleepy. The hobbit felt quite crushed, as there seemed nothing else to do. He did go to bed. While the dwarves were still singing songs and dropped to sleep, still puzzling his little head about Bjorn, he dreamed of a dream of hundreds of black bears dancing slow, heavy dances round and round in the moonlight in the courtyard. Then he woke and saw, when everyone else was asleep, heard the same scrapping and scuffling and sniffling and growling as before. The next morning they were all wakened by Bjorn himself. You're all still here, he said. He picked up the hobbit and laughed. Not eaten by wargs or goblins and wicked bears, I see. He poked Mr. Baggin's waistcoat most disrespectfully. Little bunny is getting nice and fat again on bread and honey, he chuckled. Come and have some more. How many pages have we got left? Okay. I think the plan for going to be, we're going to read the end of this chapter and then we're going to call it a night. So all they went to breakfast with him. Bjorn was... Ah! Why, Stream Elements? Why did you decide to do the follow alert first and then the raid one first? That's even worse! Well, I guess I'm not I guess we're not finishing chapter 7. I guess I'll have to finish up another raid. Ah! Ah, give me one quick second to grab my keyboard so I can give the lovely Space Voyager a shout out for. Oh, oh, my shift's up. I hope that works. Ah, book bar. No. Give me one quick second, guys. I gotta figure out why my book bot's being stupid. I guess Stream Elements decided to kill my bot. That's fine. Alright. Well, hello everybody. My name is Helreina. I am an elf VTuber, where I usually play a variety of games. Sometimes they are RPGs, sometimes they are fantasy style games, and if I am feeling brave sometimes. Thank you. And today we're having book club, and I'm reading through the Hobbits. Go check some. But hello and welcome everyone from Space Voyager stream. Space, what were you played? Apparently, my stream elements decided to poop out on my book bot tonight. If you are still here, Space, or if anyone from his chat wants to fill me in on what he was doing. Unless the Twitch side actually decided to do that. Oh, I know why it didn't work. I did capital SO. Oh! One of the fan-made games. It's a fan-made game. Yeah, that's a really nice one. But yeah, tonight I am reading The Hobbit. Ooh. Yeah, I used to play. Actually, I still kind of do play the Pokemon. Let's see. I think Arceus is probably my favorite of the new generation so far. But my Pokemon journey started with Pokemon Diamond back when it first came out on the DS. I'm surprised they haven't decided to do a Fire Red like update or yeah, like an update to it. It's theoretically could easily be done nowadays, I think. Yeah, it was one of my first. It was very interesting. Hmm. Yeah, I think that'd be an interesting thing if Nintendo actually did that. But I think that we'll have to wait and see what happens. They might do another open world style thing. Thank you, the Queen. Mm. Okay, I am muting speech chat. uh yeah, this is really hard to say. But before I forget, thank you, the Queen of Lions and CJ Hey Boy, for picking up a grimoire, the only way to get back into the Codex. And yeah, I'm also gonna let's see. I've also had a bad habit to like some previous Pokemon games where I've just played it for a certain bit and then just stopped playing it. I think the last one I started was did I get Sun or Moon? I think I got Sun, and then I got to the first challenge. I think that's what they call the gyms then. And then just never played the rest of it. And then I got Sword. Yes, I got Sword, if I remember correctly. And I think I got like the third badge in that, and I still haven't beaten that. And Arceus. I'm gonna be honest, I'm getting really lazy and getting behind on playing games as a pastime. So Arceus is probably gonna be one of those games I'm gonna take my time finishing. But I am thoroughly enjoying it though, although I kinda wish the crafting system was a bit much. I like the crafting system, I like that. I just kinda wish I didn't run out of resources as well. I started running a debate who would win the police and SWAT teams or all the legendary Pokemon from Gen 1 through 8. Started lit. That is an interesting debate. I'm not gonna lie. It's a very interesting debate. When the police and SWAT teams are all legendary Pokemon. Can we can only pick one or the other, I'm going to assume. And in this case, we can't make assumptions that the SWAT team's going to have some amazing weapon that could beat them. Am I correct in making this assumption 0? Because my brain's thinking, okay, so the police and SWAT might have like some form of weapon capabilities that could probably help them out and get in this case. Or in other cases, maybe not. But I'm probably going to go with like legendary Pokemon, let's be honest. They also got... Yeah, let's be honest. Yeah. I'm going to find it hard to believe that it's going to be hard for like police and SWAT to beat Pokemon. Even though... Try to do that? It is something to figure out in the near future. That is an interesting conversation. Alrighty, let me attempt to... Where was I? Let me attempt to get back into the chapter. And how long is chapter 8? Do I have an idea? Starts from 140 to 1... So that's about 26 pages. I shall see what happens with the next couple pages, because we still got a little bit before we reach chapter 8. Alright, for those of you who have stuck around and stayed with me as through this little small Pokemon rambling, I thank you. And if you would like to follow along in the Hobbits, we are on page 132. Yes, we're on the top of page 132. I will give you all a little bit to open the book and get to that point if you decide to read it all. And then we will go from there. Yeah. We're going to have a lot of fun time with this. Trying to do mainly book reading things for other. I mean, try to just do book reading stuff so that way, like, it's a nice way to relax at the end of the week and great way to see, like, test your guys' memory of like what you've read in the chapter, what you've heard me read. I'm still relatively learning the better ways of being a public speaker in terms of reading. This will be an interesting thing. All right. All right. So they all went to breakfast with him. Bjorn was the most jolly for a change. Indeed, he seemed to be in a splendid good humor, and set them all laughing with his funny stories. Nor did they have to wonder how long he had been, or why he was so nice to them. He had told them himself. He had been over the river and right back to the mountains, for which you can guess that he could travel quickly in bear shape at any rate. From the burnt wolf's glade, he had soon found a part of the story was true. But he had found more than that. He had caught a warg and a goblin wandering in the woods. For these he had great news. The goblin patrols were still hunting with the wargs and for the dwarves. And they were fiercely angry because of the death of the great goblin. And also because of the burning of the chief wolf's nose and the death from the wizard's fire of many of his chief servants. So much they told him when he forced them. But he guessed there was more wickedness than this afoot, and that great raid of a whole goblin army with their wolf allies into the lands shadowed by the mountains might soon be made to find the dwarves, or take vengeance on the men and creatures that lived there, and who thought they must be sheltering them. It was a good story, that of yours, but I still feel like it. It's still better now that I am sure it is true. You must forgive my not taking your word. If you lived near the edge of Mirkwood, you would take the word of no one that you did not know as well as your brother or better. As it is, I can only say that I have hurried home as fast as I could to see that you were safe, and to offer you any help that I can. I still think that many kindly dwarves after this. Oh no, I shall think more kindly of dwarves after this. Kill the great goblin king, kill the great goblin king. He chuckled him fiercely to himself. What did you do with the goblin in the warg? Come and see, said Bjorn, and they followed around the house. The goblin's head was stuck outside the gate, and a warg skin was nailed to the tree beyond. Bjorn was a fierce enemy, but now he was their friend. Gandalf thought it wise to tell them the whole story and reason of their journey, so that they could get the most help that he could offer. This is what was promised to do for them. What he promised to do for them. He would provide them ponies, one for each of them, and a horse for Gandalf on their journey to the forest. And he would lad them. I think that's supposed to be lead. He would lead them with laid them with food to last them a few weeks with care, and packed so as to be easy as possible to carry. Nuts, flowers, sealed jars of dried fruits, and red ether parts of honey, and twice-baked cakes that would keep good a long time, and a little of which they could march for. and on a little of which they could march far. The making of these was one of his secrets, but honey was in them, as in most of his foods, and they were good to eat. Though they made one thirsty. Water, he said. They were not needed to carry this side of the forest. There were streams and springs along the road. But your way through Mirkwood is dark and dangerous and difficult, he said. Water is not easy to find, nor food. The time has not yet come for nuts, though it may be past and gone indeed before you get to the other side. The other side. And nuts are all about that grows there are fit for food. And there the wild things are dark and queer and savage. I will provide you with skins for carrying water, and I will give you some bows and arrows. But I doubt very much whether anything you find in Mirkwood will be wholesome to eat or drink. There is one stream there, but I know black and strong, which crosses the path, that you would neither drink from nor bathe in, for I hear that it carries an enchantment and great drowsiness and forgetfulness. And in the dim shadows of that place, I don't think you'll shoot anything, wholesome or unwholesome, without straying from the path, and that you must not do for any reason. That is all the evidence I can. That is all the advice I can give you. Beyond the edge of the forest, I cannot help you much. You must depend on your luck and your courage and food I sent with you. At the gate of the forest, I must ask you to send back my horse and ponies. But I wish with you all speed, and my house is open to you, if you ever come back this way again. They thanked him, of course, and with many bows and sweepings of their hoods, and as many and at your service, O master of the wide wooden halls, but their spirits sank at his grave words, and they felt that adventure was far more dangerous than they had thought. All the time, even if they passed all the perils of the road, the dragon was still waiting at the end. All the morning they were busy with preparations. Soon after midday they ate with Bjorn for one last time. And after the meal they mounted their steeds he was lending them, bidding him many farewells as they rode off through this gate at a good pace. As soon as he left his huge high hedges at the east of his fenced lands, they turned north and then bore to the northwest. By his advice, they were no longer making for the main road to the south of his land. Had they followed their path would have led them down the stream from the mountains that joined the great river miles south of the Karok. At this point, there was a deep ford which they might have passed, even if they still had ponies, and beyond a track led to the skirts of the woods and to the entrance of the old forest road. But Bjorn had warned them that the way was not often used by goblins. Had warned them that way was now often used by goblins. Take your time and read. Hobbits. While the forest road itself, he had heard, was overgrown and disguised at the eastern end and led to impassable marshes where the path had been long lost. Its eastern opening had also been far to the south of the lonely mountain, and would have left him still with a long, difficult northward march when they got to the other side, north of the Karok, at the edge of Mirkwood, closer to the borders of the great river. And through the mountains to drew nearer. Bjorn advised them to take this way. For at a place a few days, his road due north of the Karok was the gate of a little-known pathway through the Mirkwood that led at least straight towards the lonely mountain. The goblins, Bjorn had said, will not dare cross the great river for 100 miles north of the Karok, nor to come near my house. It is well protected at night. But I should ride fast, for if they make their raid soon, they will cross the river to the south and scurry all the edge of the forest so as to cut you off, and the wargs run swifter than ponies. Still, you are safer going north, even though you seem to be going back nearer to their strongholds, for that is what they'll least expect, and they will have a longer ride to catch you. Be off now, as quick as you may. This is why they were riding in silence, galloping whenever the ground was grassy, smooth, the mountains dark on their left, and in the distance lying the river with trees drawing ever closer. The sun had only just turned west when they had started. Until evening, it lay golden on the land about them. It was difficult to think of pursuing goblins behind, and when they had put many goblins behind them, in Bjorn's house they began to talk and sing again, and to forget the dark forest path that lay in front of them. In front. In the evening, when dusk came and on the peaks of the mountains glowered right against the sunset, they made camp and set guard. Most of them slept uneasily with dreams in which there came the howling of hunting wolves and the cry of goblins. Still, the next morning dawned bright and fair again. There was like an autumn mist white on the ground. The air was chill, but the sun rose red in the east, and the mist vanished. And while shadows were still long, and they were off again, and they soon rode for 2 more days. And all the while they saw nothing save grass, flowers, and birds and scattered trees, and occasionally small herds of red deer browsing or sitting at noon in the shade. Sometimes Bilbo saw horns of the hart sticking up the long grass. At first he thought they were dead branches of trees. That third evening they were so eager to press on, for Bjorn had said they should reach the forest gate early the 4th morning, that they rode still forward after dusk, into night beneath the moon. As light faded, Bilbo thought he saw, away to the right or to the left, the shadowy form of a great bear prowling along in the same direction. But if he dared to mention it to Gandalf, the wizard said, "Hush, take no notice." Next day, they started before dawn. Though their night had been short, as soon as it was light, they could see the forest coming as it was to meet them, or waiting for them, like a black and frowning wall before them. The land began to slope up, and it seemed to the hobbit that the silence began to draw in upon them. Birds began to sing less. There was no more deer, not even rabbits. Rabbits were to be seen. By the afternoon, they had reached the eaves of Mirkwood, and were resting almost beneath the great hanging boughs of the outer trees. Their trunks were huge and gnarled, their branches twisted, their leaves were dark and long. Ivy grew on them. Ivory. Dang, and trailed along the ground. "Well, here is Mirkwood," said Gandalf, "the greatest of the forests of the northern world. I hope you like the look of it. Now you must send back these excellent ponies you borrowed." If the dwarves were inclined to grumble at this, but the wizard told them they were fools. "Bjorn is not as far off as you think. You better keep your promises, as anyway, for he's a bad enemy. Mr. Baggins' eyes are sharper than yours. If you have not seen each night after dark a great bear going along with us, or sitting afar in the moon watching our camps, not only to guard you and guide you, but to keep an eye on the ponies too. Bjorn may be your friend, but he loves his animals as his children. You do not guess what kindness he has shown you in letting dwarves ride this far and so fast, nor what would happen to you if you tried to take them into the forest." "What about the horse, then?" said Bjorn. "You don't mention sending it back." "I don't, because I'm not sending it back. I am not sending it." "What about your promise, then?" "I will look after that. I'm not sending the horse back. I'm riding it." Then they saw Gandalf was going to leave them at the very edge of Mirkwood, and they were in despair, but knew nothing they could say that would change his mind. "Now we have all had this all out before when we landed on the Korok," he said. "It's no use arguing. I have, as I told you, some pressing business away south, and I am already late, though bothering with you people. We might meet again before this is all over. And then again, of course, we may not. That depends on your luck and your courage and sense. And I'm sending Mr. Baggins with you. Anyway, and I have told you before that he have more about him than you guess, and you will find out that before long. Cheer up, Bilbo, and don't look so glum. Cheer up, Thorin and company. This is your expedition, after all. Think of the treasures at the end, and forget the forest and the dragon, at any rate until tomorrow morning. When tomorrow morning came, he still said the same, so now there was nothing left to do but to fill their water skins at a clear spring they found close to the forest gate. Where am I? Forest gate and unpacked their ponies. They distributed the packages as fair as they could, though Bilbo thought his lot was wearisome heavy and did not at all like the idea of trudging for miles and miles with all this on his back. Don't you worry, said Thorin. It'll get lighter all too soon. Before long, I expect we all wish our packs are heavier when food begins to run short. Then at last they said goodbye to their ponies and turned their heads from home. Off they trotted gaily, seeming very glad to put their trails behind the shadow of Mirkwood. As they went away with Bilbo, Bilbo could have sworn that thing like a bear, left the shadow of the trees and shambled off quickly after them. Now Gandalf too said farewell. Bilbo sat on the ground feeling very unhappy and wishing he was beside the wizard on his tall horse. He had gone just inside the forest after breakfast, a very poor one, and it seemed dark in there. And in the morning, as a night, very secret sort of waiting feeling, said to himself. Goodbye, said Gandalf to Thorin. And goodbye to you all. Oh, goodbye. Straight through the forest is your way. Don't stray off the track. If you do, there's 1,000 to 1 you will never find it again, and never get out of Mirkwood. And then I don't suppose I or anyone else will ever see you again. Do we have to go through? Yes, you do, said the wizard. If you want to get to the other side, you must either go through or give up on your quest. I'm not going to allow you to go back out now, Mr. Baggins. I'm ashamed of you thinking it. You have got to look after these other dwarfs for me. He laughed. No, Bill, I don't mean that. I mean, there's no way around. There is, if you go 200 miles or so out of your way north and twice that south. But you wouldn't get a safe path, even then. There are no safe paths in this part of the world. Remember, you're over the edge of the wild now. And all sorts of fun, whether you... And in for all sorts... There you go. And in for all sorts of fun, wherever you go. Before you could run around Mirkwood into the north, you would be right among the slopes of Grey Mountains. And they are simply iffy goblins, hobgoblins, and orcs of the worst description. Before you can get around it into the south, you would get in the lands of the necromancer, and even you, Bilbo, won't need me to tell you the tales of the black sorcerer. I don't advise you to get anywhere near places overlooked by his dark tower. Stick to the forest track, keep your spirits up, hope for the best, and with a tremendous slice of luck, you may come out one day and see the long marshes lying before you, and beyond them, high in the east, the lonely mountain, where dear old Smaug lives, though I hope he is not expecting you. Very comforting and you are, to be sure, growled Thorin. Goodbye. If you don't want to come with us, you better get off without any more talk. Goodbye, then, and really goodbye, said Gandalf. He turned his horse and rode down into the west, but he could not resist the temptation to have the last word. Before passing quiet out of hearing, he turned and put his hands to his mouth and called to them. They heard his voice come quite faintly. Goodbye, be good and take care of yourselves, and don't leave the path. Then he galloped away as soon as he was lost to sight. Oh, goodbye and go away, grunted the dwarves, all angry because they were really filled with dismay losing him. And now began the most dangerous part of the journey. They each shouldered the heavy pack and water skin, which was their share, and turned from light which lay on the lands outside and plunged darkness into the forest. I think we'll do chapter 8 next week. It is getting late, and I believe my roommate is asleep. Joys of having a wall that's literally right next to his room. Alrighty then, let's see if I can't find anyone to read tonight. See if I can't find here tonight. A lot of people. Scratch. Ooh. I am really gonna have to move the microphone to some other spot. My current setup. I don't know why I'm pulling this up. Keyboard here. Current setup. I do have a little. First, make sure she's not going. Don't want that. Let's see. On internet, I know you can do it. Load the Twitch chat. Load it. Come on. You can do it. Okay, she's been going for a couple of Scary Fridays. Ooh, well, let's give her a nice scary welcome. Alright, though. We're gonna raid Kyrie. And then tomorrow, my schedule tomorrow about 2, I think it's like 1 or 2 p.m. tomorrow. We will be working on my first build stream, and we will be doing the Flame Toys Shattered Glass Drift. I'm excited for this. I have not built a Flame Toys kit before, so this should be very interesting. I did, however, have a look at the sticker box just to kind of see what I'm looking at. I'm not liking all the extra stickers, but we'll go from there. I think that pretty much does it. I think next week we're going to do Friday again. We're going to be doing some more trekking along. We are like, I think, yeah, we're at the halfway point of the book, so that's pretty good. All right, I'll see y'all later.